Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Loreweek. I'm your host, Lore Runner, Lore Dude, Lore Guy, Lore Man, Lore Bob? Bob Runner. And, actually, hang on. Kill the music. Before I go any further, I just wanted to acknowledge that Peter Mayhew died, because it sucks. Apparently he had actually been working as a consultant on the most recent Star Wars films for the other guy who had basically taken over playing as Chewbacca. And I don't know. I don't have anything else to add. Everything I've heard about Mr. Mayhew was that he was awesome, and it sucks that he has passed. He actually died last Tuesday, I want to say. It was on the 30th. So yeah, that would have been last Tuesday. So normally I do like a little moment of silence thing here. I actually want to do something slightly different. In all seriousness, it sucks. Hang on. Sorry, my nose is completely clogged today, so I'm gonna do my best to not sound like my nose is completely clogged, but my nose is completely clogged. So, that is what it is. Whoops. Hang on just a second. So, Shadow Machine. Breath of the Wild. Thank you very, very much. As always, Shadow Machine. And I have jotted that down towards Breath of the Wild. So a couple of little random news things like I normally do. First of all, we're basically done with shipping out pins. I have 3 additional pin orders to ship out this coming week. I've been sitting on them for some time, mostly because it's actually kind of a colossal pain to ship out pin orders. But I believe during the next week I will actually have the availability to print out and then get the actual packages out to the store in order to ship them out. Now that's going to raise the pin funding thing a little bit higher, but only a little bit. It's only going to be another $35, $40, something like that. And yeah, the pin fund has not yet been funded. I'm just mentioning it because I have a weird feeling that most people aren't even aware we have the pin fund right now. The pin fund is exactly as I mentioned. It is exactly how much it cost to send out and ship and produce and package and all that fun stuff, all of the pins. So that's what that is. Now, what other random news do I have here? Let me look at my topic list. Looks like I'm talking about Epic during this. So, there's the Epic Store, right? Now, you're like, oh, Lore, now what? Well, I've decided I'm basically going to not really cover the Epic Store anymore. As in, not going to mention it or the news about it or discussing about it. And the reason why is, while there is a decent amount of actual discussion to be had about the Epic Store and about its application, about their business practices, about what they're doing, the harsh reality is the more and more I see it being discussed, the more I see it being dissolved into basically a bipartisan issue. Now, on the off chance you don't know what I mean by that, a bipartisan issue is where there is one side, the other side, and both of them are irreconcilable and yell and scream and rant at each other because the other side is wrong. And it gets into attackiness, and it gets into argumentativeness, and it gets into all the kind of thing that I am not in favor of in real life, in addition to on my show. There's no discourse there. There's no discussion. So I'm just going to kind of walk away from the Epic Store news stuff, because there is news I can share about the Epic Store this week. So, that's where we're at on that one. What else do I have for random news? Hang on, let me check my phone. Sorry, it's been a very busy morning for me. There's a new IP that Platinum's working on. Now, we actually have known that for a while now, but they mentioned they're going to do a big announcement about it this year, so there's speculation that either at E3 or something this year, they're going to have an announcement of whatever the heck it is that Platinum is working on. kind of looking forward to that, basically just because of the fact that it's platinum. Then we've got the fact that BattleTech has a new expansion. This is actually last week, which is the Urban Warfare expansion, which looks weird. We'll see if they actually add any legitimate content to it. So we'll see. I also wanted to plug a game called SteamWorld Quest. So there's a franchise out there called SteamWorld. In fact, SteamWorld Quest will be the 4th game in the franchise. And SteamWorld 1 is a decent kind of arcade game, older arcade game. But SteamWorld 2 is an excellent Metroidvania. And SteamWorld Heist is a surprisingly good side-scroller XCOM game. Which I know that just sounds weird, but that's exactly what it is. And it's fun, and it's awesome, and I recommend you pick it up. Seriously. And I wanted to plug the fact that there's a new one. Now, this is, again, a week-old news, because last week all we did was talk about Endgame. That's all we did was talk about Endgame. That's why this list is so big, by the way. What was I saying? SteamWorld Quest is the latest edition in it. I'm actually hoping to see some people request a run of it, because I'd love to do that on camera. We'll see. Am I excited for Borderlands 3? No. Ask me again in about a year. Let's see, other random news. I swear I had something else to mention. That was a random news tidbit. Oh yeah, we are officially cheating in Pathfinder Kingmaker, which sucks, but there it is, because the game is so long. The good news is we can turn cheats on and off like a toggle, and that's what I plan to do. In fact, I'm going to hope to basically turn off cheats anytime there's a boss coming up, and then turn them off to just slog through the trash, because, oh my god, 4 days, and just, ugh. Anyways, what else? I guess that's kind of it. I did actually manage to purchase the World Ends With You, so that's ready to go for that future premiere run. I've got the Spider-Man DLCs purchased, so that's ready to go. I also bought all of the FFs on the Switch. That had nothing to do with the show. I just wanted to do that. In fact, I have FF12 right here on my desk right now. It's still in its wrapping. Obviously, I don't have time to do that. No, we have to talk about the trailer. Sorry. I guess that's it for random news. Let's go ahead and move forward here. I swear I had something else to talk about, but I can't think of it right now, so whatever. So let's talk about Subverse, first of all, because this is something that people just keep bringing up, and keep talking about, and keep asking me to comment on it. It's just like, okay, fine. You want me to talk about Subverse? I'll talk about Subverse. So it's a porn game. Now, that sounds dismissive, and that's because it is. I am actually not all that into porn games. I'm sorry. It's not my thing. I'm fully in favor of Subverse. In fact, I kind of hope it actually succeeds. You know why? Because based on everything I've seen, it looks like the actual game part of the game is actually pretty good. Now, it's going to be a playstyle that I'm not going to be interested in, and obviously I will not be doing a premiere run of it, so don't ask. Not only would it be violating the rules of Twitch to go ahead and stream it on Twitch, and yes, I know there's other streaming platforms, but it would violate my rules, because it's actually a Forbidden List game. It's actually on the Forbidden List. So, yeah. But in all seriousness, I don't really care if this kind of a thing becomes a thing. I've heard some people be like, oh my god, it's just this horrible. And then, of course, I've heard the exact opposite argument, which is, oh my gosh, we're so weird here in the States, and all we care about is nudity and not violence, and blah, 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 blah. I don't actually fully understand why this is a hot-button topic, because to me, all I'm seeing is a game that happens to have porn elements. And I'm with that. You know why? Because, believe it or not, I am actually a legitimately tolerant and understanding individual. I know, it's crazy. I don't really care what other people do so long as it doesn't affect and hurt other people. Right? You want to do that, go for it. I don't care. Now, I don't want to have anything to do with this. See, this is why I'm not actually a prude. Because a prude would be like, that's not me. I look at this and I'm like, yeah, okay. No, thank you. Because I don't want to have anything to do with that. Now, that being stated, I do want to explain one of the reasons why I'm in favor of this, and there's actually two reasons. First, there is a natural stigma when it comes to porn, and that stigma is logical. It actually makes sense why it's there. Doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's good, but it makes sense why that stigma exists. But that stigma also kind of shows up and causes issues when it comes to quality. Because to be completely blunt, when you are already doing something that can't get normal funding and can't get normal ad revenue, and basically has to be pushed over there into a corner, both culturally and in terms of literal economic progress, what you have is a limited capacity to make something good. Now, this game just decided to jump onto Kickstarter and was like, hey! And they were extremely open and overt about what they were doing and why they were doing it. And they were like, here, let's do this, right? And by all accounts, because of the amount of money they were able to generate, it's possible they might be able to actually make a good game. Which I'm with. You know? I mean, I know that sounds so crazy to say that. But this is the first reason why I consider this to be a good thing, because it has the possibility of actually being a properly funded, well-crafted game. Now, you could argue that there are other such games that exist, and I would admittedly have no idea on that one. Most of the times when I hear someone talking about a porn game, they're referring to like a visual novel, which there's a lot that can be said about that, but let's be honest, there's not a lot of gameplay to a visual novel. Like, you guys remember, oh god, I can't think of the site anymore. It used to be a bunch of Flash games, and then it turned into a bunch of other types of Flash files. I can't think of the term of it all. But anyways, point being, oh yeah, apparently, Newgrounds, thank you, Newgrounds, that's it. Apparently there's RPG Maker games. I'll take your word on that one, I don't actually know that one. But you get my point. How many of those are games, like actually legitimately good games? Underneath, you know, the main thrust of the content. Which, of course, gets back to my overall point. And that brings me to my second point. That if this is something that we can become a little bit more, I hate to use this word, accepting of, it might be possible for this kind of thing to be better done in general. If that's one of the reasons that almost every news outlet, and I say almost, I should rephrase that, every news outlet that I go to that isn't economically based, and one of them that is, has mentioned this damn game. This is one of the reasons I'm bringing it up, too, is because everything I trawl for news has mentioned Subverse. It's like, oh my gosh, if this actually manages to be a legitimately good game and get some good press and manage to avoid the stigma of being disgusting, horrible blech, then maybe we might be able to see this kind of a thing move forward to the point where it's not quite as much of a stigma, and it's allowed to develop into its own separate industry. Because right now, let's be honest with ourselves, the porn industries, plural, are over there in the corner. They're massively disconnected from other industries in multiple different ways because of the nature of what they are. Shrug. Nevertheless, so that's my thoughts on Subverse, since so many people asked me to do that. I do want to make this extremely blunt, though. I'm not streaming it. Because as much as I'm in favor of it, and as much, just to make this 100% clear, as much as I'm in favor of it, as much as I think this might be a good thing, that ain't for me. No. And it is on the forbidden list. Now someone asked what's on the forbidden list. The forbidden list is actually extremely simple. Hellblade Senua, television, porn, and I think that's it. I think that's the forbidden list right now. Shazam. There you go. Now, Venters asks, are we talking about this game because it made a lot of money on Kickstarter? I guess? Moving on. Let's talk about BlizzCon. So, I have a couple things to say about BlizzCon. First and foremost, I don't know. Oh, hey, it finally loaded. I don't actually know if we're covering BlizzCon this year. That will, as ever, be up to you guys. We're a ways away from that at this point, so it's not really a decision that has to be made today. Can I just say really quick, that's a weird feeling. Just to feel like I don't actually care about BlizzCon this year. That's the first time I felt that way. Ever, I think. I'm not sure I've ever felt that way before. Which is just, I don't know. Not a good feeling. Anyways, sorry. Let's get off of depressing topics. Point being, we may or may not be covering BlizzCon this year. Several people have been discussing, the usual topic that comes up every time BlizzCon comes up, aka, what could they be covering this year? What could be announced this year? And the usual suspects are all the same, as they've been the same for a while. We could have some Blizzard stuff. We could have some Diablo stuff. We could have some StarCraft stuff. We could have Overwatch stuff. They're saying, oh, we have so many plans for the Overwatch Overwatch universe to be expanded. Blah, 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 blah. A whole bunch of stuff like that. But then there's the phone thing. So we have to add a little bit of context to this. For those of you not aware, Blizzard is doing a thing this year where the only way to actually have a Blizzard ticket, BlizzCon ticket, and to be able to actually, traverse the floors and all that is to have this software, which I forget what they call it. It's like APX something, or AXS. Excuse me, AXS. That's what it is. Don't want to mispronounce. So you have to actually download the AXS app, create an AXS account with the email that purchased the ticket, and then you could use the ticket through that. AXS is a digital marketplace operated by Anschutz Entertainment Group, AEG, which is the second largest presenter of live events in the world, after Live Nation Entertainment, which most of you have probably heard of because they run Ticketmaster. Now, there's a lot that AXS does, and yada yada yada. All of that is pretty normal. It basically functions as a form of an authenticator app, verifying in a more or less secure way that you are you, and again, yada yada. Now, here's the thing. Before we move forward to the actual meat of this point, I want to mention something. So some of you may be aware that some time ago we had a Lore Runner app. Now, it was an extremely basic app. All it did was send a push notification anytime the stream went live, or like an announcement happened or whatever. Like, I had a control of that. Now, several people were like, "Ooh, let's download this." And they noticed that built into this app, which basically just did push notifications and nothing else, it was like, this app has the rights to access your name and your account and your email and your info. And everyone was like, what the hell, Lore? Why do you need access to all this info? Turns out that's default. It was requiring all of that access information because that was the norm, which we had forgotten to turn off. Now, I mention that because that's the point I want to lead into here, is that is the norm. That is actually very commonplace for most phone apps in general, is gaining access to an inordinate amount of information from your phone, okay? I'm not saying that justifies it, but I do think that needs to be mentioned because no one else is mentioning it. Which brings me to a brief overview of all the information that will be collected by the AXS app while you're using it. And this is an actual list I'm staring at. Your first and last name, your precise location determined by GPS or Wi-Fi, how often the app is used, what content is used using the app, which ads are clicked, which purchases are made, which purchases are not made, the user's personal advertising identifier, their IP address, their operating system, the device make and model, the billing address, credit card number, security code, mailing address, phone number, email address. Now, this brings me to the next thing. Immediately after this is AXS's policy on what exactly they share, which, and I'm just going to read from the list here directly, is this laundry list will be shared with advertisers, marketers, and clients, as well as third-party services, including, but not limited to, Google, DoubleClick Ads, Facebook, and any company responsible in part or in full for banner ads. We also reserve the right to your personal information with our current or future affiliated entities, subsidiaries, and parent companies. In addition, we may also share your personal information and other information with trusted third parties, such as our sponsors, partners, or their affiliates, subsidiaries, and other related entities for marketing, advertising, or other commercial purposes, as well as occasionally allow third-party purposes to use it for certain sites for marketing purposes. In case you're not catching all of that, let me just summarize it very quickly. They freely, in the customer policy service, they freely state that they have the rights to this in perpetuity, as well as any company they may eventually become, thanks to the nature of the market, in perpetuity, and they have the right to sell it to anyone they feel like in perpetuity, as well as anyone that those companies feel like selling it to in perpetuity. What, dog? So... God, I don't even feel like I need to add anything to this. It just speaks for itself, doesn't it? The dog's fine, max time. He does that whenever someone's at the door. He shows up, he walks up to the door, and he starts doing this whining thing when someone's outside the door. I don't know why. He does it every time. 100% of the time someone's walking into the door, he does that. I don't know why he does it. Anyways. So, this is bullcrap. But what I find interesting about it is that on the face of it, it's actually quite innocuous. And I mean that sincerely. The whole point is what they want to do is they want to develop and push forward an app, which is mandatory, so that as you're walking through BlizzCon, they can track what you're doing, what you're watching, what you're interacting with, etc. And there will be stuff on the app to kind of tie into the booth you're at the time, or the event you're watching at the time, and all that fun stuff. In other words, a way to gain literal, factual marketing data, which, to be completely blunt, I am 100% in favor of. And I am. Getting actual, real feedback from people is something that is harder to do than it sounds like. So, I'm with the idea of doing that. What I'm not with the idea of is making that mandatory. Making it so that the only way to actually go through there and be able to participate in BlizzCon is to sign up for this service. I am also not okay for the fact that this app is going to have ads built into it, and I am further not okay with the fact that all of the information that has just been mentioned is not just going to Activision Blizzard, which, sure, but also AXS and basically everyone else they feel like forever. None of that is cool. By the way, did you know BlizzCon tickets also went up in price this year, on top of everything else? I know that's just a minor thing, and inflation is a thing, and blah, 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 but like, really? Just on top of everything else, really? I also want to mention this because I do have one other little topic here before we move on. And that is the fact that this is something that I just keep seeing happening, and it's becoming less understandable the more I see it happen. It's the disconnect between the people who make decisions and us. Like, how many times in the past 6 months have we seen a company do something that just takes customer goodwill and shreds it? And when called to task on it, their overall response is, "Why are you so upset about this?" How many? We've seen that from multiple different companies. Even if we just limit this to the gaming industry, although we could stretch this out a bit more past that if we felt like it. I've talked about this before. The disconnect, the massive disconnect between corporations and people has just, it feels weirder and larger and gappier than it ever has. And again, it's just been a thing with multiple gaming companies for just one after another, after another, after another. This is weird, isn't it? And the way this relates to this is the only actual official response that's been done on this stupid AXS thing is, what's the issue? Now, they will probably have a more significant actual company response later, but so far that's the only response they've had, which is, what's the issue? Is this not so obvious why this would piss people off? Is it not so obvious why this would aggravate people? Now, I know that a lot of businessmen and businesswomen just don't understand the concept of free will. Or, I'm saying that wrong. Understand the concept of goodwill. There we go. I'm sorry. Customer goodwill. They just don't understand the idea of keeping your consumers happy. But why would you deliberately go out of your way to try and basically piss off your player base? At the same time, we'll see if this actually has any consequence, because the BlizzCon tickets sold out within about 20 minutes. Now, granted, it is probably worth noting that the news about this AXS thing didn't actually go live until after the BlizzCon tickets went live. Which also feels kind of scummy to me, but that's unrelated. Whatever. That's all I have to say about that is whatever. Moving on. What's our next topic? Sonic trailers. The Sonic trailer. Oh my god. Let's talk about the Sonic trailer. I'm not doing a trailer analysis. I mean, no, I'm not doing a trailer analysis. That's not happening. How many of you saw the Sonic trailer? I don't have time to look at it max time, so no. Now, I've heard a lot of people already say a lot of things about the Sonic trailer, so I don't actually have a lot to mention about that. Really? Okay, we'll do this differently. I have my own thoughts on the trailer, but I already know that several people have already had, varying opinions on the trailer. In fact, one of the things I see is that several people say that Jim Carrey actually looks awesome, and I've also seen several people say that Jim Carrey looks terrible. I don't know. I will freely admit that I don't actually like Jim Carrey in general. Like, I would have to really think about me actually liking Jim Carrey. It's just, his style of humor is just not, and never has been, my thing. That's all there is to that. So, it's like, hey, it's Jim Carrey. My reaction is okay. I generally don't laugh at his stuff, is what I'm trying to say. Let's linger here as long as we can. No, there we go. Okay, so there's Sonic, and they decided to play Gangsta's Paradise. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. How many of you have ever heard Gangsta's Paradise? It's a good song, in my opinion. In fact, I would say it is a legitimately great song. Like, I feel there's some really good stuff in it. That being stated, I also think that song, one of the reasons that song is so good is because of how dark and real and morose and melancholy it is, talking about the nature of how bad that kind of cycle of violence is, and how self-defeating it is, and the recognition of being in a hopeless situation. And they decided to play this song about street violence and thug culture for the Sonic trailer. Explain that to me. Explain to me why they chose that. Now, I'll actually answer my own question for you. It's because it's a song that came out in the 90s that was very popular. It is very immediately audibly recognizable, even to this day. If you hear the dun, 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 you hear that instrumental thing, it just immediately gets your opinion. So it's like, hey, right? But the problem is, again, what? I've already been asked what I would do instead, and I already get my answer on this. Livin' La Vida Loca, which was also a very recognizable, much more upbeat song, which was also from the 90s and was a smash hit. Just my own thoughts on that. But that being stated, them picking this kind, some kind of 90s popular song does make a degree of sense. After all, the thing Sonic was always originally designed for was attitude. You remember that, right? And the more I think about that, the more I realize, yeah, okay, this is probably not a movie for me. Now, I know what you're thinking. Of course it is. It looks terrible. No. What I mean is it's literally not a movie for me. Because there was a sort of thing in the 90s, which even in the 90s, when I was myself a teenager, never appealed to me. And it was that appeal to the gross and to the rude, the attitude thing, and to the edgy thing, right? You know what I'm talking about? This affected comic books where everything started being dark and gritty and oh, we've got to have the super muscular men and the super sexy women who are twisting their spines in ways that are completely unreal and all that stuff. All of that stuff that happened during the 90s. It was a big thing. Now, Takoida says, well, Sonic didn't have much attitude. And that's true. However, everything else about the Sonic approach did. All the adverts, all of the marketing approach that that Sega was pushing was that Sonic just didn't give a crap about you. And he was not going to put up with anything. And that was Sega's whole approach in the 90s, is they were going for the attitude market, which is also part of why here in the States, Nintendo pushed for the other market. Whether that was a good or bad decision, who knows? That's neither here nor there. But that was always the approach that Sega took, especially with their title franchise of Sonic. Naturally, none of that came into the games, but the fact remains. Now, until we got to Shadow, obviously Shadow the Hedgehog, which I'm not going to talk about here. So it kind of makes sense that they go with that, especially with, again, the Jim Carrey thing. What kind of humorous approach did they show with Jim Carrey in the film, or in the trailer for the film? Him being rude and having an attitude. He literally just talks over this military guy. And unlike in real life or anything like that, the military guy just kind of takes it. And that is such a Nickelodeon thing, isn't it? There's just such a degree of that 90s attitude thing. I don't know what else to call that is present in there. They're just, I'm not going to put up with your attitude because I'm the one in charge. Face. And for some reason, they all just kind of accept it. And it's always presented as if the person with the tude is the one who is the winner of the interaction. Then, we add into that Sonic's own irreverence, which again is a very Sonic thing. And you get my overall point. Now, that being all stated, ignoring the fact that obviously everything I just said is something that is not for me, Sonic's face obviously bothers me. And I'm going to go ahead and share this because I decided to pull this up just to showcase to you. So this is something that someone did as a quick Photoshop to showcase how this could have been varied a little bit. Now, the thing I find interesting about this, and I wanted to put this image up as well for another reason, is that obviously the most of the memes, most of the Twitter talk, most of everything else has been talking about Sonic's face, most notably paying attention to his eyes and his mouth. Now, I don't think his face looks good. I don't. But his face doesn't bother me that much. Not really. And I'll just go ahead and be honest about that. You know what bothers me? And I'm going to try and explain this as simply as I can. This over here is the official one, right? And you know what this looks like to me? A guy in a suit who's had a new head CGI'd on top of him. As in, if you took off the head of this picture, I could actually believe that this is what this looked like in real life when they were filming this. That it really is just a dude with a furry suit. And this is just wrong. Like, this just looks horrible. And this is true in every shot he's in. Like, right at the beginning, they show him stretching before taking off. And I'm like, yeah, that just looks like a guy with a CGI'd head on top of him, Like, God, that drives me batty, which is why I like this one better, because they actually bothered to make his body look substantially different. Now, again, this brings us to the problem. So, the director and a couple other people have come out saying, hey, yeah, no, don't worry, we've heard your feedback, we're going to go change it. Really? Okay, I gotta explain this because this is not an easy thing to change. If they're at the stage where they already have a working CGI model, which is already interacting with the footage they've already filmed, just going back and suddenly changing that is not what you would call an easy thing to do. It's not easy, it doesn't take a short amount of time, and it is not cheap. This is, yeah, this is bad. Just to put this as bluntly as I can, like, the amount of time and effort it would take to turn this into this for every frame of the film is no. Like, that's just not feasible. It's possible. It's something they actually could do. But the odds of them doing it are very unlikely. You know what's much more likely? What is far more likely is they will take aspects of the pre-existing model, which has already been rendered for certain things, and adjust basically minor elements of it by adding mutators to it, effectively. So imagine if for every screen where Sonic is present, they add a mutator saying add 30% to this and 20% to this and 5% to this to adjust his eyes to make them look a little closer to this. Or something to basically just remove his teeth or whatever. Something that's a fairly minor change. That's a lot more feasible. That's still going to involve some time and effort, mostly time. That's going to involve a huge amount of additional rendering time. But that is something they could actually do. But that doesn't fix the issues, does it? Which means they're going to do that for, and someone in chat already said this, manufactured goodwill. The idea of being like, no, we heard your complaints. Don't worry, we're on your side. We got your back. I mean, what? So, long story short, roughly. He looks like a person. Here, look, here, watch this. There. Now look at this person over here. Well, there's a little bit, there's not even a little, actually, that's not even true. They haven't even shrunk his legs. It's just the lighting makes it look like his legs are thinner than they are, but they're not. That's just normal-sized legs. That's just a guy in a suit. God, that drives me nuts. Anyways, moving on. Please don't make me watch the Sonic movie. Like, I will if you make me. That is my job. I have no interest in it. Now let's talk more about Sonic. So, no, I'm kidding next time. I'm kidding. Actually, we are going to be talking about Sonic, though. Just a different Sonic. Where's our topic? There it is. If the movie turns out great, that would actually be awesome. It really would. I have no idea how that's even possible, but it would be awesome if that ended up being true. So now we're going to hit some Tumblr questions. Now, before we actually address these Tumblr questions, I want to talk about a couple things really quick here. First and foremost, some people wonder why we have so many Tumblr questions this week. It's because of the fact that we didn't do anything last week other than talk about Avengers Endgame. So several of these are actually a week or two old at this point. That's the first thing. Second of all, someone actually specifically asked, in fact, I'll pull up the specific question here. I don't know how Loreweek questions go, if they're a Patreon thing or whatnot, but I'd like to know, and then he asks this question. No, this has nothing to do with Patreon or anything. It's just these are questions that I feel are either worthy of discussion with you guys or something that needs to be debated out loud or on topic or whatever. And those are the questions that tend to go over the Loreweek thing. Also, if we have a Loreweek where we have lots of actual news, Tumblr questions are always the lower priority thing. Make sense? Our first question is about Sonic. So here's the deal. You have been tasked by the writers of the Sonic team to create an alternate universe where Sonic has been roboticized into either Metal Sonic or a prototype. When this happens is up to you, but the story then goes for Metal Sonic rebelling against Robotnik, and then we get our adventures from there. Now, one of the main themes of the character is that the heart and mind are both his heart and mind, both figuratively and literally. So, what story do you write? What media do you do with this story? Because it could be a game, it could be a show, it could be a book, it could be a pinball machine. Don't do a pinball machine. Could be a comic. Lord knows Sonic has been thriving in the comics for years at this point. It could be a phone game. You guys have phones, right? Forgive me. I love quoting that particular meme, mostly because it's just it was so astonishingly out of touch with reality. And just it had to have been the absolute worst possible thing that guy could have said in that moment. Like, it's still, to this day, I can't believe he actually said that. I wouldn't be surprised if he went home that night like, oh my God. Or went to his hotel like, oh my God, why didn't I do that? Why did I say that? I don't know. I didn't really watch the animated show all that much. I did watch a little of it, but not all of it. What would the design be like? I don't know. I'm still reading questions. So Takoida says, how do you make a game out of that? I don't actually fully understand your point. Nothing, little Billy. Don't worry about it. I'm sorry, Blue Wolf. It was fresh in my mind because the BlizzCon thing. What is the problem of all Sonic games? You can't zoom the camera out enough. In my opinion, that's the biggest problem with them. I can't. You have to memorize where you're going because you just can't react that quickly because you have like a 10-foot barrier of. That actually makes me sad, Golvag, and that's all I'm going to say about that. That's all I'm going to say about that. I don't want to get into it again. Oh. See, the problem is Sonic's whole thing, literally his whole thing, is speed. Like, that's all there is to it. If you're gonna have speed as your shtick, you got to do something with that. So if we were to do a robot Sonic game, here's my first thoughts. First of all, let's go ahead and make it a little Metroidvania-y, in that there are multiple paths to progress which rely on certain abilities which can be unlocked based on one side or the other. Now, you're probably thinking, what do you mean one side or the other? I like the idea, you mentioned heart and mind, I like the idea that for Sonic you can either focus on being fast or being everything else. Like, if you go down the speed route of upgrades and abilities, it's not a literal talent tree, but just the items and mutations and equipment that you put onto yourself, then you have speed and nothing else. If you go with everything else, well, then it would play probably a little more traditionally, like a more typical, Metroid or Mega Man or whatever game, because then you would have a kit. You would have abilities, you would have moves, you would have interactions with the environment, and interactions with enemies, and blah, 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 to make you more focused on basically a completely different play style. And the idea would be that either way would be able to progress, either way would have a functional ability to move forward, and that wouldn't even be that hard to do. Just to name an example right off the top of my head, you need to get to Zone X. So Zone X over here has a corridor that you can run through to get to it, but this corridor is filled to the brim with like slowly filling lava. And it's just straight up impossible to get through here in time unless you're going full speed, right? Unless you have taken all the speed upgrades. And then you just blaze through and you're through. So then there would be another path to get through here, and this would be filled with enemies, or, it would have a certain, like, I don't know, maybe it would have a particular incline that is so high up you just can't jump it normally, even if you got full speed. But if you happen to have the thing that allows you to dig the spines on your ball form into it, you can just and spider wall climb your way up. That kind of a thing. Making it so that both of these have the capacity to progress. That kind of a thing. And Mega DA says Sonic Unleashed sort of, well, as I think I just described, no. Because Sonic Unleashed, oh, that sucks. Sonic Unleashed was day stages, night stages, and the day stages were actually pretty awesome, and the night stages were awful. Werehog. Anyways. Why would Robotnik roboticize Sonic without killing him? Well, the easy answer here is if we want to go weird, we should be like, well, okay, so he roboticized him, and then Sonic's will managed to break himself up, but I don't like that kind of thing, and I never have. So I like a better idea. Why not have it so that Robotnik is not the one who does it to him? Someone else does. Someone else who is trying to emulate Robotnik's technology or ability or whatever. Maybe even someone who is actually on Sonic's side. Sonic willingly signing up for this to be able to, do a better job of taking out whatever Robotnik is doing, right? We could also not make Robotnik the villain. If I'm being blunt, I think most of the more interesting Sonic stories, with one exception, have not actually had Robotnik as the bad guy. Then, of course, there's Sonic 06, which didn't have Robotnik as the bad guy, but let's ignore that for a moment. Hang on, Max Time, your sentence got cut off earlier. You said, then he will follow those memories to his friend, and Tails ends up turning him back into Sonic, because of course he can. Now onto the gameplay, kind of like the classic where skills reward you with speed, the B, and then it chopped off. Yeah, the bugs were the bad. No, the load times were the bad guy in Sonic 06. I will never let that go. The load times were just... oh, painful. At least Tails isn't in the Sonic movies. Or is he? I suppose that's all I got, Baron. The better you are at handling speed, physics, and platform, the better you are. Ah, okay. So, typical Sonic game, then. Mania. The bugs were the heroes of Sonic 06. I'll agree with that. The box. Props if any of you know what I'm talking about. When another Metal Sonic shows up, what happens? Why would another Metal Sonic show up? Like, I wouldn't have another Metal Sonic show up. I've kind of already given my ideas. I don't have anything else to add to here. The villain would be someone new. The actual villain, the main antagonist, would be someone new. Robotnik would either be on the side or just kind of doing his own thing. As opposed to the villain. I wouldn't add Tails, or anyone else, actually, for that matter. I wouldn't add any of the ancillary casts. Yeah, I guess that's it. I guess I can move on to my next question. Where's my timestamp? What's the next question? Transformers. More than meets the eye. Oh, God. Well, I mean, doesn't Tails, like, have a full name? Hang on. Miles Prower. So if the name of the guy in the Sonic film is Miles Prower... Anyways. So what do we got? Timestamp. So the following question is about Mass Effect and Transformers. Mass Effect is being crossed over with Transformers. How do you make it work? Who would Commander Shepard work alongside, and who would they get along with the most, and how would the war with the Autobots and the Decepticons change the face of the galaxy? Reapers don't exist, but Geth and AI do, and the fear of them still exists, obviously. So we've the Reapers out of existence, and we suddenly have the Autobots and the Decepticons. Now, forgive me for being weird, but Transformers actually fits neatly into a lot of other settings weirdly well. Like, just weirdly well. because Transformers, for all of their presentation, are actually a very, ironically, adaptable thing to be grafted onto another setting. So we actually have a decent amount of options here. Now, I like what Takoida says. It was actually an idea that was kind of bouncing around my brain I didn't really have words for. The idea that the Geth are actually a rogue spark. That they are... what, Max Time? The idea that they're a rogue spark. That they are a transformer of some kind that just kind of mutated horribly because for some reason sparks can mutate. I'm not even making that up. That's a real thing. And it just kind of goes off and became the Geth. Now, I also like the idea that since the Reapers are gone, I like the idea that the Transformers functionally take the place of the Reapers. Now, I don't mean the killing all organic life every 100,000 years. No, my point was that Transformers do fit well, not badly. Anyways, sorry, getting off topic here. So, the mass relays and the Citadel would be Transformer stuff, basically. They would be elements of the old civilization, which I actually can't even remember the name of off the top of my head. Okay, that makes sense, Max Time. Sorry, I'm with you. Because there's actually a decent amount of lore to Transformers, which always amuses me a little bit, given what it started out as. But certainly more lore than GoBots. Anyways, so I like the idea that the old people, the original, God, I can't think of their name, but the ancient ones of the Transformers were the ones who either are or built the relays and the Citadel and the concurrent technology. And the people have started using them, and like the Citadel is kind of a safe haven sort of an area, right? You're just supposed to not do anything there. So the Decepticons and the Autobots and the various races of the galaxy kind of coexist there, but there's always some kind of tension going on, And then you have to, leave in order to deal with everything else. I don't think I would make the Normandy a Transformer personally. I do like the idea of at least one Transformer being a recruitable character. I mean, duh, right? Now, it would have to be one of the smaller scale Transformers, but I mean, there's plenty of those, so that's not really a hard thing. I don't think we should introduce the morph bots. I can't remember what they're called, but the ones that can appear as human. They actually showcased one of those in the second movie for some friggin' reason, but anyways, you know what I'm talking about. What else? So someone earlier in chat mentioned, and I love this idea, I like the idea that Shepard's choices lean either towards Decepticon or Autobot. Now, for this to work, the Decepticons would have to be kind of rewritten, because the Decepticons, as they're usually portrayed, are Sith. Like stupid Sith. Like really ridiculously stupid evil. And that just doesn't work for me. And if we're going to be writing them into Mass Effect, then let's just kind of get rid of the stupid Sith aspect of the Decepticons and turn them into, what the Decepticons should, in my opinion, actually represent, which is basically the Templar thing. The order. The everything is going to be taken control of, and everything is going to be this way, and, basically the totalitarian regime mentality. You could do that without them being, we're all stupid and evil, and we're all going to kill each other. You get the point. Yeah, ruthless. That's a good word, Bregwin. I like that word. Ruthless. Structured. And I know that sounds stupid, but if any of you saw the recent Bumblebee movie, that's kind of how they portrayed the Decepticons, which I kind of liked. The Decepticons were willing to manipulate and control, and were far more militaristic and far more well-designed. And that worked. I was with that. I was like, yes, God, that's such a better take on them. Now, anyway, so someone earlier mentioned the ground vehicle. Yes, absolutely. Of course the Mako should be... No, I guess it is a shark, isn't it? So never mind. The Mako should actually be an Autobot. Of course it should. I mean, hell yes. Hey, Sinister Wing. Welcome back. We're discussing Transformers and Mass Effect right now. Did I mention I'm a geek? So... So make Decepticons a possible choice. Make the Autobots possible choice. And... bring in Unicron. Don't make Unicron the arc villain of the trilogy. I mean, that just kind of slides neatly in, doesn't it? Because Unicron then functionally takes the villain slot from the Reapers. He's literally a planet-eating death thing that has the ability to alter other Transformers at the base level. He can consume sparks. He's technically multidimensional. We don't have to bring that part in. But you get the point, right? Bring in Unicron as the main threat to both the Decepticons and the Autobots, thus making it logical why Shepard, who would be interested in trying to help save things, even Renegade Shepard, remember, was still trying to make things better. Renegade Shepard was just a dick, but also, you know, ends justify the means. Let's go. Quickest path forward kind of a thing. It would make a degree of sense for a Renegade Shepard, if a little redesigned, to side with the totalitarian Decepticons in order to set up the defense against that frickin' thing, right? I mean, that fits so easily, I don't even feel the need to further explain that. So, hang on. So, there's been a couple of specific points that have been brought up. So, would Transformers be capable of being spaceships? Now, if I'm being honest, I would lean towards no. Mostly because, in my opinion, Transformers got a little bit too high tier for its own good, even back in the original cartoon show. Mainly because of the fact that they wanted to sell bigger and more expensive toys, but, you know, what was it, like Unicus Prime, or what the heck it was called? The Complex? And that frickin' spaceship, the mega huge spaceship that had 3 separate forms, and you know what I'm talking about. All the really big, really huge Transformers that are literally city-sized. I think we should stay away from that in general, and keep the Transformers more at, like, vehicle-sized. Astrotrain, that was the one I was thinking of, Astrotrain. Keep them more vehicle-sized or smaller. We can have exceptions. I don't mind the occasional one that's big, but we don't need... Like, how many combiners exist in Transformers? Let's look this up really quick here. I don't mind Devastator being in, by the way, because Devastator's awesome. Yeah, look at how many combiners we have here. So there's Devastator, obviously. There's the big one. And then we have... Hang on here. Are you just going to give me, like, a list, or do I have to read this manual? I'm going to have to read this manual. Oh, here we go. So we have Devastator, Predaking, Raiden, Monstructor, Road Caesar, Leo Kaiser, the Big Rescue Force, Landcross, Big Powered, Magnaboss. This is a big list. I'm not going to go through the whole list. You get the idea. Bruticus, Defensor, Menasor, Superion, Abominus, Computron, Skyrain. I think I already said Predicus. You get the idea. None of that. At most, I would have, like, one combiner. Devastator, the classic one, the awesome one. Agreed, Blue Wolf Alex. I would absolutely have some party members be willing to leave based on your choices, because it would be an ideological battle. Now, no, I'm not, Fab Alex. You can look it up. You can look it up. I didn't even mention some of the weirder ones. Here, what was that one that caught my eye? What do we have? There was one that was like... here it is. Dark Mega Wing Galvatron is one of these. Or Tripredicus is a real one. Or Mega Scream. Or the Functionist Council. Or Galvatronus. These are... I got a list right here. You can look it up if you don't believe me. Anyways, rewind. So, I like the idea of fightercraft Transformers. I mean, that's basically what several of the Decepticons already are, right? I mean, they're even decently big. It's, again, going back to Bumblebee, one of the things I liked is they portrayed the fighter Decepticons, like the guy at the beginning who fought Bumblebee, as reasonably large. As they should be. I mean, have you ever been next to an F-14? Those things are big. I know we don't really think of that because it's a fighter craft, but... So it makes sense. I'm with that. That would be about the cap, I'd say, for normal. And I like the idea of there being ships that basically are designed to launch multiple fighter Transformers, and I'm with that, especially given the malleability that would allow for combat. You know, if they managed to get in range enough of a ship and managed to literally land on a ship, well, they could just start ripping that thing apart, can't they? What was the other thing I was going to comment on? Other than drinking water, thanks to Hydration Bot. Remember, water, it's fantastic. There was something I was going to acknowledge. Someone said something in chat. Oh yeah, someone said something. Norgafell, there it is. What if the Mako is a Decepticon, and it's a dramatic reveal towards the end of the first game that the Decepticons have been spying on the crew? Not only do I like that, I like the idea that we, through our actions, can kind of decide what happens with that Decepticon. Remember, in our sort of revised Decepticons, they're not evil. Or at least they're not necessarily evil. I should be more accurate about that. So I like the idea of the Mako-con, whatever the heck it is, being able to like change your mind towards its philosophy, or you changing its mind towards the Autobot philosophy, depending on what you do in the first game, which could then change who your vehicle is in the second game. You could have the Hammerhead, which would be, you know, whichever, probably just an Autobot, or if you either go with the Decepticons or convince the Mako to go with you, then you have the Mako in the second game. You know, just little stuff like that I think we could do. No Ectotron! Now, I mentioned Devastator earlier. I really like the idea of building up to Devastator and basically making it so that Devastator doesn't actually show up until Mass Effect 3. Obviously, this is a rewritten 3. But basically, you know how you could kind of already see the build-up, right? Like, have the Constructicons be in the first game and the second game, but it's usually like you're dealing with just one of them. I don't know all the names off the top of my head, please forgive me, but you know, you're just dealing with the mixer guy, right? Or you're just dealing with the chemic guy, just periodically. And then in the third game, depending on what you do in the first two games, you have the option to get them together to do this whole new thing. And the idea would be that combining would be a new concept. Like, it's never been done before. This is something you invented in order to try and deal with the Unicron threat. And you invent Devastator, effectively. And I would have the result of Devastator be either, hear me out, kind of similar to the film Devastator, not with the Iron Balls thing, but I mean in terms of how it's just an animal that has no thought or function because of how poorly it's designed, or it becomes this mega death machine of doom if it is very well designed. Something like that. Good morning, Overlord Mech. Interesting, Blue Wolf Alex. I'm curious how you guys design Megatron. Because... why not both? Because that doesn't work. Those are literally opposites. One of them has a brain and one of them is a beast. That's the whole point. Because the reason... this is actually explained in Transformers lore. One of the reasons that Devastator tends to be so stupid is because all of the minds don't combine naturally into each other. They don't Tetris together. They just kind of turn into a giant ball of yarn that you can't untie no matter how much you frickin' move this thing out of here. And so as a consequence, Devastator's dumb. He's just, you know, he can't even talk half the time. Or, again, if you design it correctly, you could work with the various Constructicons across Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 so that they actually Tetris together properly and form a more proper whole. That's what I was thinking with Devastator. Now, Omega Supreme, again, I'm thinking no. Like, I know you're all going to hate me for this, but I don't like the idea of going into too much into the big stuff. I want one combiner, no more. And Devastator is the iconic combiner, so we go with him. Now, in like Mass Effect Andromeda, we could think about more combiners in the future. But for now, we're just going to stick with Devastator. So, the organic plant guy that infiltrates the colony back in Mass Effect 1. So, I mentioned how I don't want any of the human, the bio thing, the bio changer Transformers. I can't think of their frickin' names, but, you know, the ones that can appear as a person. We could just have one of those be there, and it be the one who infiltrated the Thorian colony. We would need to decide... See, I like the idea of keeping Saren a Turian, rather than turning him into a Decepticon or an Autobot. But I also like the idea of Sovereign functionally being a Transformer. Probably in the same, basically being a herald of Unicron, right? One of the Transformers that Unicron got his claws into and converted, you know, kind of like he ended up doing with Galvatron in the movie. Also, I do want to say very cool Avengers. I've always loved Combiner bots. I actually no longer have. I ended up selling all of my Transformers, but I used to have 2 Combiner sets myself. I had Bruticus and I had Devastator, and I was very pleased and happy with those. And when I say Devastator, I'm talking G1 original release, you know, the ones where the green was a slightly different color, kind of more yellow of a thing. We could say Saren was an attempt to literally combine Spark with Organic. An attempt that probably didn't go all that well. Or we could say that that was forced onto him by the Sovereign bot, whoever that ends up being. And that's why it doesn't work right, because it doesn't. It doesn't actually gel well. And so Saren would more or less literally be an abomination. Now, Baron asks about the 2 big iconic guys. As weird as this may sound, I like the idea of the iconic, you know, Transformers characters not being a major presence here. Or, actually, I'll be completely honest, my first thoughts was that they wouldn't be in it at all. There would be no Megatron, and there would be no Optimus Prime, and there would be no Prime Magnus, whatever his name is, you know, just gone. Instead, basically having it be Transformers from both sides. Maybe a few, hey Nerdman, maybe a few ones that are, you know, iconic ones, but not actually making them the big guys, right? Yeah, either because I like Overlord Mick's idea, actually. I was thinking what Baron was thinking, make them busy off in the background doing whatever. But I like Overlord Mick's idea. Make it so that the really big name Transformers are historical figures at this point. They are long since gone in the past. And so Megatron has been dead for, you know, decades or centuries or whatever, right? And same thing with Optimus Prime, and same thing with Bumblebee and Starscream and all the other big names, you know? Maybe having like one of the big names enduring into the modern era, but you know, not openly. You know, maybe one quest somewhere ends up uncovering Soundwave, for example, something like that. So indoctrination, what do we do to replace indoctrination? That's true, Takoida. We could. That's a nice idea. Have the Krogan uplifting have been in direct reaction to the original Cybertron war, back when Megatron and Optimus Prime were really duking at it. I like that idea. Can I just say really quick that I love you guys? Like, I was actually worried that this would be getting a little bit too geeky and people would just think I'm stupid for talking about Transformers lore and combining it with Mass Effect. Because I thought it was a neat idea. And you guys are, like, right with me here, and I love it. You guys are awesome. Well, see, that's the interesting thing, is because, what in the world is this? Oh, right, yeah. I didn't mean to, Nerdman. It was an accident. Hello, Colgrim. Hi, upon a time. So, rewinding a second. We could have Cyclonus be Sovereign. That's not a terrible idea. We could also have it be, you know, again, a new Transformer. I like the idea of original Transformers. I like the idea of designing new Transformers for something like this. That appeals to me. Now, so yes, Unicron was able to indoctrinate. That was a thing. That was definitely a thing that Unicron was capable of doing, and he did many times. His indoctrination was far more brute force. He would tell you what to do, because he could connect to you at any range, and if you disobeyed him, he had control over your body, so he could just torture you until you do what he says. So, in other words, it wasn't actually indoctrination, which is much more subtle and horrifying. It was a far more literal, It was basically a shock collar. It was the equivalent of a shock collar. I'm going to torture you until you do what I say, kind of a thing. Now, I still think that could work, because all we'd have to do is make it so that, you know, that device or whatever it is something that Unicron or his agents can basically just shove into people, even organic people, and thus even normal people can be like, ah, yeah, I should. Why are you limping? No reason. It's just been a long day. Please leave. You know, I could see a lot of good scenes for that, especially if someone just starts in the middle of a conversation. I would recommend, whenever it comes out, like in a cheaper format, Nerman, I would recommend watching the Bumblebee movie. It has some very stupid moments, and every now and again it makes no damn sense. But it is, in my opinion, one of the best Transformers films we've ever had, and make of that what you will. Like, there was some really good stuff in there. So how are new Transformers made? That's an interesting thing, because the lore has changed on that one several times. But, I do like... Yeah, I know, Aleph. I do like the idea of... So one of the things that one of the Transformers films did that was a neat idea that failed miserably was the idea of humans trying to build their own Transformers. You know, that were better in every way. I do like the idea of people, especially the Asari, really digging into trying to construct their own Transformers. I also like the idea that they basically aren't as good. Either they don't have the same range of transformation, or they're just not as well built, or they're not as durable, or they don't have the same energy output, or something that just makes them worse. We could also say that they basically are effectively VIs, that they don't have a true artificial intelligence because they don't have a spark, right? And in the absence of a spark, they lack sentience and sapience. They functionally don't actually have a soul. Now, Takoida mentions Ezo. I like the idea that all of the originally born Transformers functionally use Ezo as a form of a power source. Apparently, Tazara agrees with my idea. No, wait, no. Thank you, Tazara. Thank you very, very much. As always, really, I appreciate your support, and you're awesome. Thank you. As always, when you do something like this, I would like you to decide if you want that to put that towards something, or if you want the people you have gifted those to put that towards something. Either way, thank you again, sir. I like the idea that the Quarians attempted to make their own Transformers, and that's what the Geth are. The Geth is the weird mutated spark that they captured and tried to turn into their own Transformer, and it turned into the Geth, and that caused issues. I also like the idea that the sparks are kind of a zero-sum game, that any Transformer that's killed, its spark is released, and then can thus become a new Transformer. The only catch is we have to decide where new Transformers come from for that, so let's leave that on the side. I'm thinking of other major events in Mass Effect and how I would want to address those if Transformers were a thing. Damn it, Tazara! Why? Why would you do this to me? Thank you, Tazara, again. As always, and as ever, I am appreciative. Ezo would functionally become Energon, or actually, to be slightly more accurate, Energon would become Ezo, because all of the Ezo rules about the mass effect, about the actual... about the way Ezo interacts with mass and allows you to reduce mass and have shields and go faster than light and, you know, biotics and all that stuff. All the things that Ezo allows is just that's Energon, basically. Thank you again, Tizara. Really. Anybody who Tizara just gave a thing towards, a sub towards, you can decide if there's any new runs that you're interested in, you'd like to put that towards. Otherwise, I'm just going to put those all down towards the pin fund, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 pin funds, maybe. So, I like the idea that the Citadel is where new Transformers are made, but basically, I mentioned how the Transformers... You got it, Pave Maniac. Let me go ahead and jot that one down. Really quick here. I like the idea of... So I mentioned the idea that Citadel is neutral ground. I like the idea that one of the reasons it's neutral ground is that it's a graveyard. That they just kind of shove dead Transformers into a specific section of the Citadel. And I say shove, but like have it actually be a venerated place, a place where the bodies of the Transformers go to rest. And a new spark could be recalled to basically the well. The Allspark thing could be there in the Citadel, and then a new spark could just go out and basically effectively randomly combine pieces of old Transformers into making a new Transformer. Something like that is kind of an idea I like. Now, it wouldn't be a true reincarnation thing. Not really. The idea would be that this would basically be, the energy would just be crafting a brand new Transformer. But I kind of like that idea, especially since I like that zero-sum concept I just mentioned. It's funny, I actually answered that question right at the beginning, Nerdman. The questions I add to Loreweek, I'll answer you again really quick, is any questions that I feel are really worthy of discussion, or I really want to address with you guys, or whatever, you know, something that I can't just answer in a quick thing, that come in through my Tumblr feed. And my Tumblr feed is basically a Q&A feed, so there you go. And yeah, it would also make capturing Transformers as undamaged as possible a thing. I like the idea of there being a background plot thread of the fact that bit by bit, Transformers are becoming less, right? Like over time, and as generations go on, the original bodies of the Transformers are getting so damaged and so broken down that they're just not working the same way anymore. And so new Transformers are either literally getting weaker or having less capability or whatever, you know, kind of a stagnation built into the thing. And then, of course, you have the idea that, you know, maybe some people will be trying to fight against that, or trying to, as Takoida says, go out of your way to do everything you can not to damage a Transformer, even as you're trying to kill it, you know, that kind of a thing. Just, I feel like there's a lot of story stuff you could do with that kind of decay background element. Now, Overlord Mix says Reapers are the most... Well, actually, Reapers don't exist in this. It's one of the provisos of the question, is Reapers are gone. So something else had to take their place. Now, we could say Unicron is the source of the Transformers, but I don't like that at all. Funnily enough, I do think this is a fascinating concept. I do think we could legitimately make a very interesting story by just meshing Transformers and Mass Effect together. I think the two, as I said at the beginning of this, I think the two fit surprisingly well together. You got it, Aleph. So that would be right here. Cyberpunk. So noted. Thank you again to Zara, but also you, Aleph. The Council? Well, I mean, see, the thing is, functionally, a lot of the infrastructure of the biological races doesn't really need to change. In fact, if anything, the Council would probably be more of a force than they otherwise are, with more military presence and more economic strength and blah, blah, blah. Why? Because they have to maintain their own sovereignty in a setting in which Transformers are a thing, right? You know, organics unifying against, not necessarily against, but in face of Transformers, right? So that's Battlefleet, Gothic 2. Thank you, Mega DA. Thank you very, very, very much. And I'm sure many other people thank you too, since you're putting that towards the pin fund. That would be... give me just a second. I have to math really quick here. There we go. Jotted down for the pin fund, and thank you again, Mega DA. I'm sure the additional 3 people I'm sending pins out to in the coming week will also thank you for that. I like Takoida's idea of the Citadel not being the capital of the Council, but rather being the capital of just military races, a military staging point. We could still go there. It would still function as kind of a hub for us. It would just have a more military tint to it, which honestly Mass Effect 2 already went that direction with it, so, I mean, it makes sense, right? We would probably have to have... Actually, that's not true. We could just have all interactions with the Council be on Holocom or whatever. Although, if I'm being honest, I would probably put the Council's literal power on Thessia. Because there's just so much logic to me that the Asari would play politics enough to have even more domination over the galactic stage in a setting in which Transformers exist. Are Transformers legal? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. But I like the idea that the VI formers, I just came up with that at the top of my head, are not legal. Like, they're not actually something that's allowed under law. And you know why? For the exact same reason the Geth were illegal, or AI was illegal, back in actual Mass Effect. Because the Geth, remember, were an attempt to make these VI formers, or V formers, or whatever. So, future V formers would be illegal. This gives me an idea, then, because that could make Edie a V-former. She could actually be one of the biologically constructed, not quite Transformers. That would also give us an opportunity to make this Normandy SR2 a V-former. So we would actually have our ship Transformer there. I like that idea. So that would make the Normandy 2 a Transformer, but the Normandy 1 would not be. I like that. No, we already basically said no Transformer ships earlier. Only rare exceptions. See you around, Seraphim. Have a good day at work, hopefully. And yeah, obviously Cybertron would have to be there. And we'd have to have some presence there. So someone asked, how would Mass Effect 3 change this? Well, I mean, if we're being honest, if we're including Transformers and ejecting Reapers, Mass Effect 3 would be completely rewritten, even ignoring the fact that I would completely rewrite Mass Effect 3. And I don't want to talk about rewriting Mass Effect 3 again, because we've talked about that so many times. All I'm going to mention is the idea that, at this point, Mass Effect 1 would follow the same general story beats, but Mass Effect 2 and 3 would both be functionally completely different, because of the nature of how much we've altered the setting. Are the Protheans still around? No. Although we do have a precursor race, and I can't think of their names. The old Transformers, in other words. The ancient Transformers. What if I did include Reapers? Well, I wouldn't. If you put a gun to my head, I'd have to think about that. Are Transformers really that much of a threat? Well, see, actually, I would say yes. By the way, hi, Spoke Off. I would say yes because, remember, Transformers are basically just like us, but also they're much more individually and personally powerful. They still have orbital weaponry. They still have ships. They still have infrastructure and militaries and resources, right? So their threat, at least when properly written, is the exact same as our threat, just a little bit higher, right? Think about that. So yeah, no, I would absolutely say Transformers are that much of a threat, especially if they've always been here. I also say that, as I already mentioned, I like the idea that the Cybertron War happened back in the time during the Krogan uplifting, and the Krogan were uplifted to help the organics deal with the Cybertron War. Like, the Cybertron War had spilled over so much into galactic society that it was causing issues for everyone else, that it was causing devastation on a huge level. So they uplifted the Krogan to try and deal with that issue, and that just turned into a mess. Why is Edie a headmaster? The headmasters are so gross. Can we at least have her not look like a headmaster? Because they're so weird looking. Exactly, Overlord Mick. Exactly. Vorlons is a great example. Oh god, that would be horrifying, Dakota. We know that sparks being unleashed is a devastating thing. It's practically an atom bomb going off.
Your dedication will be rewarded.
I sure hope so. Been working at this a long time. Oh, you weren't talking to me. Right. Let's see who that was talking to. It was Vigilant. Well, I hope you enjoy the movie again tonight. My mom, it's a funny fact, Lore Mom has actually seen Endgame more times than I have. She's seen it 3 times now. She really liked it. I hope you really like it again, too. And thank you, as always, Vigilant, very, very much for the support. Let me jot that down. This doc, I got 3 documents up right now. Give me a second. Towards Battlefleet Gothic. Oh yeah, you want real quick. This is off topic massively, but you know how much I love my mom. I mean, obviously most people love their mothers, but you know how awesome Lore Mom is. Random text from yesterday, just out of nowhere, unprompted. May the 4th be with you, and then she just started talking about Star Wars. That's Lore Mom. As I've said over in my Star Trek Ruminations, she basically got me into a lot of things I'm still into to this day, including Star Trek and Star Wars. Sorry. No, I don't, Sonic. Mass Effect and Harry Potter? I'd have to think about that one, because that's a different direction. Oh, so you're taking off of... So, okay. You're thinking in terms of how the movie functioned, Dakota, where you could release spark energy and it would convert technology into Transformers, which is magic. Just straight magic. But that is how the movie portrays it. I don't know what I think of that. Because that opens up a huge can of worms, setting-wise. The moment you can just kill a spark to make a bunch of new additional Transformers, there's a lot of issues with that. There's a lot of things that you do with that to adjust the setting, and we would need to explain why that doesn't happen more often, and what kind of defenses people had in place of that, and blah 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 blah. So yeah, let's talk about a Transformer crew member, and then we should probably move on from this topic because we've talked about this one question for like half an hour. Who would you have be the Transformer crew member? If I'm being honest, we should probably have 2. Yeah, go ahead, Nerdman, because I'd like to tackle that one next week. We should probably have 2. We should probably have a Decepticon and an Autobot. But you got it, Overlord. Hang on. Well, as I already said, I firmly don't think that the Normandy SR-1, the ship in the first game, should be a Transformer. I really like the idea of the SR-2 being a V-former. It would also help to explain Shepard's reaction to getting on the Normandy SR-2. And it would actually probably be a whole character arc of Shepard either growing to accept EDI or not, you know? I was actually thinking Ratchet. That was actually one I was thinking. Or something like Ratchet. You know, one of the much smaller, more animal-like Transformers. Again, I remind you that I don't want any named Transformers, so I wouldn't actually have it be Bumblebee. But someone like Bumblebee, I could kind of see that. At the same time, as I've already said, I firmly think that the Mako should be a Decepticon. Excuse me. So Mako, sure. But I mean like in combat. Like I like the idea of a Transformer being in combat with you. Which is why I like the idea of the little, you know, the leopard Transformer or whatever. Now, that being stated, what we could do is basically kind of combine those two ideas. So, for example, the Mako could be a transformer, which you drive around on, you're like, and just picture the Viseria or whatever, the frozen planet, right? And so you're driving around the frozen planet, and then you pop out of the truck to go interact with people, and then you pop back into the Mako, and you remember that, right? So have it be as you pop out, the other transformer pops out of the Mako. The one who actually is part of your ground-based combat thing. And the more I think about it, the more I'm falling in love with this idea of it being one of the animal transformers, one of the little guys. Probably very heavily... See, part of the thing I like about that is it would make them very melee-focused, right? Because we don't actually have a lot of melee capacity when it comes to the Mass Effect series, and I think that would be a nice thing to add to the dynamic of having your one melee-focused guy being a transformer who just charges right up there. That'd be a neat idea, I think. Hey, hang on, Nerdman just asked a question. He says, "Why are you so stupid? What is wrong with your ugly face?" Well, see, my ugly face is so ugly. Anyways. Like maybe a motorcycle, something like that. Something very small. Like Ratchet, as someone earlier said. I think it was Ratchet. I do like the idea that the Mako and the hammer in the second game have the ability to basically, like, let's call it support you. Let me put it to you this way. One of the things I like about Warframe, I know this is a weird tangent, is if you have an ability, you can basically call in orbital support, right? Similar concept. Maybe you have a cooldown of, like, call in an artillery shot right here, right? Or do a scan burst to give you a pulse of where all the enemies are and, reduce their stats or something like that, right? Some kind of way that you could have the Mako and the hammer still actually be, or the hammerhead still actually be part of combat, but not literally in combat. You just... I didn't insult you, Nerdman. I think I didn't. Ask me later, Spokov, because I don't want to spoil that. All I'm going to say is that I'm not happy with what they're doing and moving on. So that's how I would go with that. Small ejector transformer, and then the big one just stays back there supporting you. I like the idea of the pulse. If anybody's played Division or Division 2, like, the pulse ability is pretty much one-to-one what I'm talking about. I like the idea of, like, an artillery strike. I like the idea of being able to do, like, maybe something... This would be manually crafted, but, like, maybe in a specific mission, you could have an option to say, Mako, do me a favor and do such and such. And so as you're going through it, there's this Geth ship in the distance, which all of a sudden just gets smashed because the Mako rushes off to destroy it by himself. Something like that, right? So you would have and if you do that, you would lose the ability to use those cooldowns for a while because the Mako is off fighting the other big thing, right? But now the big thing is out of the equation for you. Stuff like that. I like that idea. Yes, by the way, happy Revenge of the 5th, everyone. For those of you who like Star Wars. And for those of you who don't, happy Revenge of the 5th. So, okay, let's chop this off. We can keep talking about this, but let's chop this off. Fascinating question. Where's my question saying? Hang on, I've lost track. So I actually have several more to plow through today. Which one's next? Which one's next here? Okay, so this one's kind of a personal one, but I wanted to answer this one on camera because A, I'm curious if you guys can name any of my characters, and B, this one kind of hurt me. So you're sitting home one day. Oh, I should get a timestamp. One moment. You're sitting at home one day, and suddenly George R.R. Martin kicks down the door. It's okay, he can afford it. He explains to me, he's going to write a story within the extant, within the lore extant, where a lot of main characters die. Now, 3 characters that I adore within the extant, I have to decide die a gruesome, disgusting death that he comes up with. Now, I can't refuse the question, so which main characters do I allow him to kill within the extant? Now, yeah, in fact, you have mud all over your boots, George. Just, what are you doing? Have a little bit of decor, man. Here, I got a carpet. I literally do have a carpet over there by the door. Put your shoes on there. We're a shoeless environment here. So Cashel says Zaydenra. Ooh, okay. Whew. So Cashel says Zaydenra as someone to permanently kill off. And Zaydenra is a character within the extant related to Mass Effect, but not really. Can anyone else name any other characters? I don't blame you if you can't. I'm just idly curious. I do plan to continue that whole audiobook thing. It's just I'm still hammering out some physics problems. That sounds like a joke, but it really isn't. I'm literally trying to hammer out some physics problems in order to explain FTL, or rather early FTL. Later FTL's already been explained. That's done, but moving on. Well, I'm soon going to start releasing little audio tidbits that will help to get people into the extant, Overlord Mick. So, hope that's basically the answer. In the future, once I finish with the physics problems, that'll be the main way to get people into it. Zalash, that is another one. Yes, that's absolutely correct. Zagmus, I actually wrote Zagmus out of the setting, just completely wrote him out. However, I did effectively supplant him with Zithmias, who is someone who, different personality, different character, but he occupies the same slot in continuity, basically. So I've had to rewrite a few sections of stories to kind of adjust that it's a different person. But that is 3 characters, Zaydenra, Zalash, and Zithmias. I'm glad nobody picked Merlinay, because I would never let George R.R. Martin touch her. No way in hell. In fact, I'm disinclined to allow him to touch anyone female, for obvious reasons. Because it's George R.R. Martin. But, you know, no, Nicholas. Although Zanasma is a character within the extant, but anyways. So, but this is... the other reason I wanted to address this on camera is this is an interesting question. I know Blue Wolf Alex, he has his own continuity. I know Cord, he writes his own things, you know. I know several of you are writers. And it's an interesting question if someone approaches you and basically you have to pick characters that you have written, that you love, that you like, in order to be brutally killed by another character, but, you know, by another author. You know, how do you choose, right? Which ones do you choose there? Because there are several characters that I am particularly fond of that I simply would not allow him to touch. But at the same time, you know, a beloved character dying can and indeed should be a good thing when it comes to fiction. Damn it, Final Cloud. Can it be gently killed? No, in fact, the direct wording of the question was, they have to die in a gruesome, disgusting death that only George could come up with. That is the specific question. Now, yeah, see, I think in the exact same way, Aleph. It comes down to the character arc. Which characters would I be willing to allow to die at all? Because a death has to serve some narrative purpose, in my opinion. You don't just kill someone for shock value. I am very against, and then they're dead! You know. But, so I suppose I should actually answer the question now that we're on camera. So my first thought is Zithmias, although the catch there is Zithmias is someone who I have already written his death, so I'm not sure I want to adjust that. I mean, I could just let him write the death he has and make it horrible, but that feels like cheating, right? So that's not really in. Now, Blue of Felix says, can they be villains? Absolutely, as long as they're a character you adore, which is the other part of the question. It has to be a character you like writing for and that you care about personally. So, yeah, exactly, Mega. So, yeah, I'm limited rather substantially in who I could pick here. I do admit the idea of Emperor dying is interesting, because he's always served a very specific story point, and he's always more or less deliberately been a non-character, and having him die might actually, as weird as this sounds, be a way to make him actually be relevant as a character within the setting. I mean, it wouldn't even be hard to see him, speak, Pletty, speak, or else. I suppose I could also mention, any of the more minor characters, but again, it has to be a character you adore. And you see why this is such a hard question, right? Like, this is so difficult to choose. Like, I don't want them to die. They're not ready to die. I don't trust you with that, and so forth and so on. I also have to admit it would be interesting. See, the problem is I can think of two characters that would be interesting to have them die that I don't trust George R.R. Martin with. Both of them are female. That would be Myriad and Zaydenra. I just mentioned her earlier. Myriad is... she's a Lamia that has multiple up there. That's why she's called that. Do any of my characters have plot armor? No. No, there's no such thing as a character that can live simply because plot. I'm very against that. Yeah, no kidding, Nicholas. The Extant is my setting, Land the Stupid. It is the setting I've been building since I was a kid at this point. Basically, everything I've ever written or designed, story-wise and actually codified, is part of the Extant. The lore Extant is the full term, but I just call it Extant. So I've come up with one so far, Emperor. I suppose I could add... well, see, that's just cheating. Like, Tazara there, he's just cheating. God, I don't actually have a good other answer. I'm going to go ahead and chop this off, because I'm sure that no one else really is interested in me debating this. And especially since I'd just be naming characters you guys don't even know. But I wanted to kind of put it into your guys' thoughts, the idea of having to choose a character that you love of your own fiction that you have to allow another author to kill. Just thank you very, very much, as always, Tazara. I have jotted that down towards Towers of Time. Excuse me, Tower of Time. I always screw that up every freaking time. And thank you very, very much again, Tazara. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Well, you don't get to choose where it would happen. He would choose that. It's part of the point. Yeah, you don't give it to another author. Yeah. I mean, there are some good things about giving, your written works to other authors. But there's also some bad things. So what's next? Where's the... Mario Brothers, right. How many of you have seen the Super Mario Brothers movie? The old one. The only one, really. I mean, there's the cartoon thing, but, There we go. I've seen that film. In the theater. Yep. Saw it in the theater, I think. Pretty sure. Almost positive about that. Oh, I remember that Nerdman. He was livid, from what I understood. I'll admit I didn't like it as a kid. Yeah, no, I did see that in the theater. I even remember where I was when I saw that. Yeah, I didn't like it all that much. It was very fun to make fun of. The question in question is somewhere on my list. Here it is. You have been hired to fix the infamous Super Mario Brothers movie. Here's the catch. Here's the provisos. You have to stick to the original premise, but the overall plot, characters, actors, design, locations, that's all up to you to change. Now, that means the original premise, if we are to bear that down, because he doesn't actually clarify, would be, real world, Koopa world, or whatever you want to call it, and all of the people down here, oh, I know, Nerdman, all the people down here are, descendants of dinosaurs instead of descendants of apes, which I'm not even going to get into, and I guess the overall main thrust of the plot is trying to remerge the worlds so that they can then be unified and conquered. So there you go. There's the base premise of the thing that we have to stick with. So how the hell do you fix that? How do you fix that? That's true, Aleph. I don't know. The actors were fine. John Leguizamo actually did a reasonable job in it, and I mean that sincerely. That being said, I am actually a pretty big fan of Bob. I can't think of his name. Give me a second. I'm looking it up. Oh, it is Bob. Holy crap! His name is actually Bob. I am actually a pretty big fan of Bob Hoskins. Legitimately, I've liked him in quite a few things over the years. But his performance is kind of bad in that film, and I don't mean that as an insult. Again, if you've seen, as Nerdman mentioned earlier, if you've seen the behind the scenes, you understand why his performance was kind of bad in that film. Because, Yes, his name is literally Mario. And yeah, he actually was legitimately drunk on set. And just it's a whole mess. You can look it up. It was bad. I feel bad for the guy. What's funny is that came after Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which I point out because I mean, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is actually a really good film even to this very day. I'm not even going to bring up Brazil. Anyways. So we've got the base premise here. Obviously, a lot of the actors would have to be reshuffled around. I would actually, as weird as this may sound, I would like to offer Bob Hoskins, obviously, let's assume time travel is available and Bob Hoskins is 30 years younger. I would actually like the idea to offer him the chance to come back and do it. Because he's a good actor. Because he's a legitimately good actor. And if we could actually treat him properly and give him a good script and have a good director, I actually think he could do a decent job of that archetype of the normal guy, Mario. Basically the same general portrayal he did in... oh, he is dead. He died 5 years ago. So again, time travel. If we could have him be in it, I think he could do that sort of put upon everyman. In many ways, the same way he portrayed Eddie over in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Just a little bit, less rough around the edges, and there you go. There's something I could think as a pretty good Mario. So, just my opinion on that. Now, Dennis Hopper, I have a weird opinion on him. Because Dennis Hopper is cheesy as crap, and I love it. Like, I've basically always enjoyed Dennis Hopper's presentation and his acting. But I have a much harder time picking out something he's in that is a legitimately good screen. Don't worry, Nicolas. I never had any eyes. The Speed, or Waterworld, or what else was he in that era? There were several films I liked of him in that era. He's been in a lot of stuff, too. That's the other funny thing. He was one of those, I'm going to do any role kind of actors. Blue Velvet, yeah, I'll give you that. What else? I feel like there's at least one other. Anyways, point being, Waterworld. I'm the deacon. Anyways, I just realized I haven't really addressed the question yet at all. So let's address the question. Let's actually, how do we remake this film? That's true, Cashel. That's actually probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire film, the ba-bomb scene. I'm not even kidding about that. The first and most obvious thing is we have to make a choice. Because with the premise we have, we can either try and slant it more towards the actual Mario lore, or more away from it, and make it more of an interpretive work. And I have to admit, my first thought is to go more the other way, to try and push it away from Mario lore, to make it less Mario-like. Now... I'd probably not make the alternate Dark Universe, the one where they are L.A. Like, I don't think I'd go that direction with it. The pseudo neon grunge look they were going for. I also have to admit, as weird as this may sound, I would probably de-emphasize Bowser substantially. To the point where there is almost no presence of Bowser in the film at all. Instead, I would have the Koopalings be the main antagonists. And have each of them, be the characters that interact with and push back against and and try to, defeat Mario and maintain hold. Or maybe, see, of course, me being me, I'm immediately thinking of the terms of, like, the next 3 movies, right? I should stop doing that, because I'm trying to This is why I don't want to make films, really. Like, if I suddenly had Q powers, I wouldn't make films. I would make TV shows, I would make games, I would make books. Films are so limiting. But I like the idea of having there be, like, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 Koopalings, and they're the main ones. Like, this is, so you plop down, and it turns out that this area used to be the kingdom of Princess Peach, the kingdom of the Mushroom Kingdom. And this place was smashed in the face and conquered by the forces of Bowser, the Koopa Troop. And one of the Koopalings has been left as a regent in the area. And that Koopaling, and maybe like one other they interact with, those are the main antagonists you actually see throughout the course of the film. Now, see, Aleph brings up the big question, because I'm thinking structure of story first. But we should probably address, do we go live action or do we go animated? If we go live action, then we're going the Pikachu, Detective Pikachu or Sonic route. If we're going animated, then we are going the Who Framed Roger Rabbit route. No, Max Time. And I'm actually admittedly kind of torn on that. Like, I'm actually not sure which I would prefer. If we're presuming we had the ability to, make it happen. Now, Blue F. Alex, you like the original film, and I'm honestly curious of your specific opinion on that. Which would you do if you had to choose between the two? Oh, Pikachu will probably actually be good. I plan to see it next weekend, I hope. By the way, hi, Detective Rarity. I'm actually pretty torn on this. I really am. Because I could see benefits to both. It's worth noting that the animated version, I think, would probably turn out better. Even if it would be a little bit more... Especially since, remember, the premise is to merge both worlds, so how the hell do we show that visually? But at the same time... Actually, never mind. I already answered my own question. I like the challenge of making it live action. Because, as I've said before, one of the hardest things is to try and take something that's been a video game or an animation and make it look decent in live action. I wouldn't go particularly serious. Even though it is my inclination to write both serious and dark stories, I probably wouldn't go that route with this one. Yeah, let's just go with animated. Honestly, the other way would just work so hard. So, I mean, it would be possible, I think. I'd like to think it would be possible. I'd like to think that the Detective Pikachu movie will prove me right on that. But let's just do animated. So yeah, basically the idea would be this would effectively be a Who Framed Roger Rabbit thing, where the idea would be to try and merge the two worlds, so it is effectively Who Framed Roger Rabbit at that point. In fact, honestly, I would have the premise, if you remember in the actual film, that we're merging, and then they demerge. I would completely eject the demerge. I would have them successfully merge, and that would be the change to the status quo. So, now there are cartoons walking around the real world. Again, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right? I actually liked the woman who played Peach reasonably enough. If anything, the only thing I would do is I would have her be more of a main character. I mean, I know the old trope is you've got to save Princess Peach in the castle, but honestly, the Peach I've always thought of as the one who is a doer. Now, granted, that's mostly coming from the RPGs, where Peach is usually a party member, but you get the idea. So, I would have the princess. I mean, Bowser wasn't in the movie either, Nicolas. So I would have the princess actually be an active party member, basically, someone actually doing. Nobody likes Daisy. Don't be ridiculous. I suppose that's true, though. It was Daisy, wasn't it? I actually kind of forgot about that. She doesn't have a picture on Wikipedia. Sure. Okay, so it can be Daisy. I don't actually care. It can be Daisy. Doing her thing. I'm thinking... I don't know. I don't know what else to add to it. I feel like everything else would be just a massive amount of minor changes and specific alterations as we're going throughout the course of the film. Trying to adjust it. Again, I do like the idea that it eventually ends up with the two worlds staying merged. I also kind of like the idea of the Koopaling in question, probably Larry. Let's just use Larry for traditional sake. Have Larry be someone who comes along with and is like, ha 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 ha! And then we'd have to decide exactly how wacky or serious we're trying to be here. Because if we're going full wacky, then people will be like, oh, shoot him quick. And he's just like, what? Bullets don't do anything to me. I'm a toon. And if we're going serious, well, that's going to go in a much different direction. We should probably go wacky, I'm thinking. I think that's a good idea. Happy Cinco de Mayo! Exclamation mark. Lord Mom. Exactly, you need toon bullets for toons. It's obvious. Anyways, I don't even know how I'd end that. Like, I feel like I've written myself into a corner. So they merge, and then Mario embraces the cartoon. And then just curb stomps Larry. And then, yeah, have it end with, like, don't forget, the rest of us came over, too. Something like that. I don't know. I don't know. The problem is, God, it's so difficult to work with that in such a limited fashion. I give up. You beat me. You win. Moving on. Next question. So, God, we have so many questions today. Hang on, let me get timestamp. At least a moderately accurate timestamp. I like that idea, Dakota. That Mario basically is like the perfect merger in between the real world and the cartoon world. Like, he just so logically fits with both worlds that he can do more than... He's the hybrid, right? And that's why Mario's the hero. Anyway, so... the question... This is actually a funny one. So the question is, I don't know how Loreweek questions go, if they're just a Patreon thing or whatnot. Oh, he doesn't say just. If they're a Patreon thing or whatnot. But, here's the question. Enjoy the pizza, Aleph. How would you handle the Disney WandaVision show? Imagine Kevin Feige comes to you and wants you to pitch him the story. However, you can't change the title from WandaVision. So... For those of you not aware, WandaVision, I really hope they come up with another title later on, is the TV show spinoff that's going to be coming out on Disney+. That is a story... We know basically nothing about it, but we know that it's going to be about Wanda and Vision from the MCU. It's one of the several MCU shows they're pushing in the Disney Plus thing. So, So yeah, the title's terrible. Let's just start with that. But as a quick reminder, we have no spoilers still for Endgame. I just want to make that very clear. But where would you go with the story of such a show, of WandaVision? Now, part of the problem is that Wanda and Vision, even in the MCU, are high tier. He's a high utility character who can literally morph through matter. And she is a glass cannon who can wreck just about anything in her path as long as it doesn't get back to her. So, how do we deal with that and make that an interesting show? It's also probably worth noting, and this isn't really spoilers because this was an Infinity War as well as Civil War, the two are an item. So, yay, romance. Lol, max time. Now, funnily enough, I think Black Vial's joking, but I agree. I really do. I would make this be a show that's not a superhero show. I would make it a more normal show that happens to star superheroes. So their powers and abilities would be things that would kind of affect situations, but for the most part, the overall point is more that they are just trying to live, rather than trying to defeat the big bad guy who's trying to destroy the city. That's where I would go with that. Actually, yeah, fairly similar to what Lois and Clark did many years ago. Make it a more mundane, down-to-earth, slice-of-life story about Wanda and Vision, both of whom were effectively children. Not literally children, but they're both young. They're inexperienced. They are not full adults, at least not in lore. And they have no idea what they're doing, and they are both, again, I re-stress this, very powerful. Again, some of the highest tier characters that currently exist in the MCU. So, having to deal with things like, trying to just make existence work and trying not to go into just, I wouldn't even have like a main villain of the show. At best, I would have other characters kind of slide in and out of their lives. And in fact, I actually like the idea of a recurring theme being the two of them basically saying no to superhero work, unless it's like a really big deal. Like, okay, no. So, in case you didn't hear me 5 seconds ago, Venters, I did just say no spoilers for Endgame. But yeah, the scene in Civil War, I actually liked that scene. That was a nice scene next time. So... and yeah, having it be... It could easily turn into a sitcom. I don't want it to go full tilt into sitcom. But make it an ordinary show. Make it a rom-com. Make it something that's about everyday life and them trying to make it work. What's the time difference between the two? I don't know off the top of my head, Lycon. I want to say about a year, but I could be completely wrong about that. Oh, sorry, Nerdman. Sorry. We're up to WandaVision. One idea I kind of like, and I don't have a specific answer here, but one idea I kind of like is in a TV show, the way it tends to work, and this is true even today, is you have a budget, and this is your season budget, right? And while this can go up or down, this is pretty much where you're supposed to be, right? Now, most TV shows... No, I have not, Nicolas. Although that's funny. Most TV shows usually deliberately save money by reducing costs of certain episodes in order to spend all the money on one or two specific episodes, right? This is a very common television thing. So, what I would do is I would have the overall powers usage and all of the CGI stuff, all of the effects stuff that you normally expect from a superhero thing be contained to like maybe one or two episodes here or there in the show. Have there be an episode where something actually happens they have to try and deal with. Probably not a villain. I like the idea of it being more like a natural disaster sort of a thing. As Dakota mentioned earlier, make it a problem that you can't punch to death. Make it so that there's a building collapsing. And she can kind of hold, I can just picture her very straining to kind of hold the building in place while Vision morphs in through the walls, grabs people, and carries them out through the walls, shifting right out, stuff like that, right? Making it a problem they have to deal with, and again, using their powers. Go ahead, Nicholas. Rather than it being a enemy that they have to defeat, something like that, right? And maybe giving them just a little bit of an ability to deal with this. Oh, I agree, Takoida. They'd have to be using their powers mundanely, as you and I have both said many, many times. There would have to be, like, just normal things about that. Things that usually fiction, especially with the X-Men stuff, usually only has happened, like, once or twice in an entire movie, because they just seem to forget about it. I also kind of like that idea, Detective Rarity. That could be the overall plot thread. The main undercurrent thread is that they are constantly on the run, trying to move on and stay ahead of, everything. This could also be why they try not to use their powers so often, because that would obviously be, at least in public, that would be a big thing for, they're fugitives, right? Thus, the earlier example I made of the building falling over, as soon as they do that, they basically have to bolt. Because now they have just very openly, obviously done that. There's probably some guy back there with his phone going, oh my gosh, look at that, filming the whole thing. And now they got to flee, And thus, again, the earthquake itself is only part of the problem. The other part of the problem is getting out. Just little stuff like that, right? But I also like the idea, hear me out. In this critical episode, like, it would probably be halfway through the I have no idea what you're talking about, Max Time. Halfway through the show, the series, the season, they have this big thing, earthquake, building, crash, and I would like the idea that they've kind of started getting a little bit settled. Like, for the episodes leading up to this, they've started actually getting comfortable with the area they're at. No one's been spotting them. There's no reason for them to stay under the radar. There's been no reason to flee. Earthquake hits, they save a bunch of people, now they gotta leave. And at this point, it becomes something that's not just, the threat, in other words, is not, oh no, we have to get out in front of the people. The threat is, we have to leave a home, someplace we've actually become comfortable with, someplace we don't want to leave, right? Something like that. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of work that could be done with something like that. You missed a lot of geeky discussions, Spinobi. I don't actually remember that Max Time, so I can't comment on that. So I got nothing. Probably Detective Rarity. That wouldn't be that hard at this point. Anyways, that's my idea. I got nothing else. I would turn to Faggy and say, why do I have to call it WandaVision? At the end of my pitch meeting. And he says, how would you make this happen? I would say, it's super easy, barely an inconvenience. Well, admittedly, I have no idea how to write romance, so I leave that in your purview next time. God, 2-hour Loreweek. We're not even done. Kuja, FF6. So this is some Final Fantasy talk, for those of you who don't care. So I got a question a while ago, shut up, Fat Alex, where someone asked me how I would rewrite Final Fantasy IX if it had been Kefka instead of Kuja. Now I'm going to give you a very brief summary of my answer there. That wasn't it. That was just actual sneezing. The rough answer was I completely rewrote FF9. The idea was that Kefka was one of the original genomes that Garland... sorry, massive spoilers for FF9 here. I should preface those. Spoilers. For FF9 and for FF6. Spoilers. The idea was that Kefka was one of the original genomes that Garland had produced and actually imbued with a soul, so it would have the ability to be the Reaper of Death in order to go to Gaia and wipe out the people and start the cycle, right? Basically, Kefka taking the exact same slot that Kuja had. The catch is that this Kefka, being Kefka rather than Kuja, turned out completely wrong. And so Kefka was completely broken and barely capable of feeling or thinking or otherwise being a normal entity. And so he rebels against Garland. Garland shuts him down and basically puts him over here in stasis, just like all the other genomes. Similar to what he would have done with Zidane in FF9, if not for the fact that the party was there, basically. Cut back to the main game. The main game goes basically in the same way that it otherwise did, except there is still the war happening and all that. It's just there's no Kuja there. In fact, there's nobody there, except for maybe like a guy or a girl or whatever, who is the agent who is working for the actual Reaper of Death. I'm just going to speed forward. It's Zidane. The idea here is that Zidane was actually then successfully turned into the Reaper of Death for Garland, because there was no Kuja to wipe his memory or his purpose. So Zidane is actually the main villain of the first 3 discs, basically, or the first 2 discs, excuse me. And he is in the main party as well. Now, I was torn on how I wanted this to go, but the general idea was that once you get to disc 3, and you find out all the things I just told you, you would be able to free Kefka. And I wasn't sure which direction I would want to go with this, because the idea is either... Kefka is you release Kefka and he is a much more sympathetic, much more engaging character, and he ends up basically joining the party, and you redeem him or whatever, and he ends up helping you kill Zidane, which then leads to Kefka effectively slotting into the same gameplay slot that Zidane had, since he would have been built exactly the same way. So we could lore reason this away. But the idea is, gameplay-wise, nothing would change. It's just now you have Kefka and his animations instead of Zidane and his animations. Or the idea could be that Kefka serves as a way to redeem Zidane. That because of what happened to Kefka and the realizations of just how horrible Garland is treating his people, and the Terrans are treating Garland, Zidane just gets sick of it and finally decides to break things. Now, the idea, this would only work if Zidane had been slowly working up to having a character arc leading up to this moment, where Zidane would then be redeemed and turn around and actually become a good guy. And that would also turn Garland into basically the last boss, or one of the Terrans, but you get the idea. That was the overall idea. So that's my quick and dirty summary of what I had. This idea is basically the inverse. So what if you had to redesign FF6, except instead of Kefka, it is now Kuja? Now this is a bit of a trickier one, because the idea is that when Kefka was birthed into, I say birthed, it became a significant force within the Gestalian Empire, it would have been Kuja instead. Now, Kuja's not really one for following orders, and also someone who basically is way too full of himself, right? Like, he has that vanity thing going to the 11, which again kind of leads me to thinking the same general idea I mentioned over in FF9, that Gestalt would shut him down, because there's no way Gestalt tolerated Kefka, because Kefka was a mad dog who was on a leash, or at least Gestalt believed he was on a leash. Up until the floating continent, again, spoiler, up until the floating continent, Kefka was on the leash, basically still doing everything Gestalt was down for, and Gestalt firmly believed he was in control. Kuja, I'm not sure if Gestalt would actually be capable of knowing that he doesn't have control over Kuja, and actually tolerating his continued existence. The only way I could perceive it is what Bragwin just mentioned, the idea that Kuja is just stringing Gestalt along. But then that brings us to, like, the overall thrust of the plot, which honestly would only be a little bit different in the World of Balance, I think, because the idea would be that Kuja would probably be running all around. Exactly, Nicholas. There are people who still haven't played FF6 and FF9. You realize that, right? Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking, Tigzar, is the only way it could work is if Kuja was very polite and respectful to Gestalt's face, and then spitting on him afterwards. Okay, gotcha, Nicholas. Sorry, I have to defend that no spoilers policy every now and again. I honestly think the World of Ruin wouldn't have happened as is at all. So what I'm thinking is World of Balance would be functionally the same, but the overall idea is that Kuja would have been using his connection with Gestalt in order to try and get to the Esper world and get to the statues and gain all that power for himself, in a similar manner to his overall arc in FF9 about trying to get the power of trance, right? So Kuja is trying to manipulate his way through the Gestalian Empire and through Gestalt himself to get to the power. He gets the power, he kills Gestalt, but he doesn't destroy the world. Why would he? The reason he did that over in FF9 was because of the limited lifespan thing and the realization and absolute destruction of the idea that he was about to die, and that just 404'd, right? So that leads us to what would happen then. That leads us to X9071 Strife, apparently. It leads us to Strife. It does lead us to Strife, but thank you very, very much, 9071 Strife, as always. And as ever, I do appreciate those subs. If there's a future stream that you're interested in that you'd like to put that sub towards, just let me know, and thank you. I feel like there's a lot of ways we could go with that. Basically, I do think there should be a second half of the game in a similar style to the World of Ruin, but I don't think it would actually be the World of Ruin. The only way I could see that happen is if it turned out that Kuja had a limited lifespan. And he finds out about this from Gestalt as he kicks Gestalt off a tall thing, and you kind of see where I'm going with this. But the problem is, the whole limited lifespan thing doesn't quite line up with everything we've learned up to this point in time, because again, that only was, again, as Dakota mentioned in passing, very specific circumstances over in FF9. So I don't think Kuja would have a limited lifespan, which leads us to, what do we do next? Now, what Dakota mentions is an idea I had vaguely bouncing around in the back of my head. I like the idea that Kuja goes into the Esper world with Gestalt, and instead of the floating continent, the mid-dungeon is basically what's left of the Esper village that we saw in those brief flashbacks. And then the World of Ruin is bouncing back and forth between the Esper world, which would actually be a fully explorable world, a new area, kind of FF5 style almost, and the main world, and how the two are starting to interact in ways that they shouldn't. Because the idea here is that Kuja has effectively become the new god of magic, replacing the statues, right? But because of his vanity, because of his childishness, because of all the issues with him, and his inability to morally comprehend consequence or purpose, stuff is just bleeding over back and forth, right? And so, yeah, exactly, there's layers of reality just merging with each other in a bad way, in ways that shouldn't happen. And that would be the World of Ruin, dealing with the consequences of these mergers and these disasters, and the monsters showing up, or the people showing up here, and some people just being... There's a lot you could do with that, is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of story potential with just that premise. And the idea would be that as you make your way through, both the world and the Esper world, eventually you would try to find out the nexus of where Kuja is, probably in the Esper world, and stop and destroy him. Not, again, because his mere presence is basically destabilizing reality. In other words, I know that sounds stupid, but we would have a definitive reason for going after the final boss, other than the fact that he's the final boss. He has to be removed from the board, right? Now, I kind of like Nicholas's idea a little bit. I'm not sure where I'd go with that one. See, part of the problem here is... Hang on, Baron. Part of the problem here is one of the things that I liked about Kuja in Dissidia was his less evil tendencies. I don't know how else to put that. When Kuja was being not stupid evil, I found him the most interesting. Even in FF9, he has an extremely minor attempt at, like flinging attempt at redemption right at the end there. And I think, and yeah, I agree, he was more complex in the Dissidias than he was in FF9. I think that, which Rax here was for this one, I think that we could I want to do something with that. I want to do something with Kuja to flesh him out to be something more than just the vain prince on top of all, because that's just Mateus at that point. That's just Emperor Mateus. I like Takoida's answer. That's a great answer. So rather than magic fading, I like the idea that with his destruction, the consequence of destroying him, the consequence of removing him from the board, is all of the magic he was incorrectly regulating just gets deregulated, and the world just goes back to the way it was, right? The way, yeah, as Takoida says, the way it was before the War of the Magi, a fundamental changing of the status quo. Transkuja, easy answer. Transkuja literally destroys a planet. It's hard to best that. The only character, in my honest opinion, the only being in the Final Fantasy series I think that was stronger than Transkuja was Exdeath at his height. Are you going to get any taquitos today in celebration? Question mark. It doesn't know what taquitos are. Whatever. So Baron has asked several times, how would Kuja interact with the characters? I feel like there's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways to go with this. And I'm not sure which one I would want to go with. I like the idea that his interactions with the party over time basically add a layer of... Okay, let me rewind a second. I like the idea that part of the reason that Kuja in FF6 is so messed up in the head is because his effective father is Gestal, who is a disgustingly evil human being, right? Like, anyone raised by that maniac is going to have issues. And so I like the idea that as he starts to interact with the party members and other members as he goes throughout the game, he gets a little bit of a taste of what interactions are like when the other person isn't a horribly manipulative, evil bastard. This also ties into what I believe is the main theme of FF6, the connections between people. And so the idea is, unlike Kefka, Kuja would be slowly developing connections. Probably not like friendly or romantic connections, but, just connections of rivalry or connections of respect or connections of something between himself and several of the main characters, several of the main cast. This then, the way I think I'm most defaulting to go through this is I like the idea that by the end he's like, no, I'm going to prove you all wrong. I'm going to do it right. I've taken your lessons to heart. I'm going to regulate magic from now on. I'm going to build a world where there is never going to be another Gestal. And that's what he's saying, and that's what he's doing at the climax of the middle point of the game, when he takes the power and takes the statues and ends up becoming the new nexus point of magic regulation. But of course he can't do it right, because he is inexperienced, because he is childish, because he fails at it. And so our job then becomes trying to, and failing at convincing him of this, no, I can do this right. Why are you trying to stop me? You're the ones who even showed me I could do this. I thought this was the better path. Was it all just a lie? Was it a betrayal? Were you just manipulating me just like he was? And then that leads to us having to eventually kill him, because we have to, because at that point there's nothing else there for it. I think that's where I'd go with that. I'm not sure, but I think that's where I'd go with that. It would take some work, and he would have to have a presence in the world of Ruin, which is the opposite of what Kefka did. Because remember, Kefka had no presence in the world of Ruin. That was one of the thematic story points, is Kefka just pieced out. He was like, well, even this was meaningless, I don't actually understand your question, Overlord Mick. I'm sorry. So that's how I would put Kuja in FF6. I would probably have at least one party member mourn his death. I like the idea of it being Terra. I kind of like that idea. I also kind of like the idea of... So, Baron asked, how would the final battle go? Obviously, there would be a final fight against Kuja. But I kind of like the idea that right at the end, he effectively stops fighting back. That he effectively stops trying. Because he realizes that he is killing Terra. Someone who he has connected with, and is probably the closest one he would consider to be a friend. The closest, his understanding of what a friend is. And that's when he finally just self-destructs, releasing all the magic, and then... Or it could be Celeste. That's actually not a bad idea. I take that back. I like Celeste better. The other victim of Gestalt. I like that better. I do. It could be both, because it occurs to me that both would be affected by this bad regulation thing, right? Celeste being an infused knight and Terra being a half Esper. Both of them would be literally, physically, as well as metaphysically altered by the the mess that he is creating with magic right now. This is another reason I like doing some of these questions here, because it's a nice way to get the creative juices flowing. Which one is the best? Oh, geez, I don't know, Overlord Mac. Magus, Chrono Trigger. There you go. Easy answer. All right. So, I would say that Terra afterwards, this is just my take on it, since magic is redistributed, right? I can't speak. Redistributed. There we go. Back to the world. I would say that Terra would functionally just have total control over whenever she shifts back and forth between Esper and human form. That's how I would probably do that. It would just become a switch for her, a toggle, since that also concludes her character arc, becoming and accepting who and what she is. Her first character arc. Anyways, so next question, because I still got 2 left. The Nintendo movie project. Now, we've already designed a NCU, if you'll remember. We already made a Nintendo Cinematic Universe. And I actually still have notes about that, because I want to do something with that someday, because we came up with some great ideas. But this is specifically a movie thing. And it has to be live action. So we have some issues here. But the ideas are... So we're a lot more limited here. So how do you make a Nintendo cinematic universe work? Sci-fi elements, character lifestyles, jobs. How big would the cast be to start off? How would they all meet for the first time? Who would be the villain of that storyline? Who would be the humans or aliens or hybrids? Would Mario be human, Kirby alien, Samus hybrid, Link question mark, question mark, question mark? It's a very vaguely written question, so it's kind of, how would you do this? We could, if we had the resources and power of Disney, which, I mean... So, we would have the option to do something with this. Now... I admit, Link is the amnesiac time traveler. I actually really like that idea. He just shows up like, huh? He hardly says anything. Like, I wouldn't have him literally have no dialogue, but I would have him be someone who barely ever speaks. Not only as a nod to the original thing, but as because of the fact that he's having issues. I also kind of like the idea, if we're going to do this, what I would probably do is I would take the stories and plots from the games, and I would throw them out the window. And I would basically just come up with a complete reimagining of everything. Like, if we're going to go this route, I would just completely rewrite it, which is basically what the MCU did. So, I don't know is my answer to that, Detective Rarity. So let's assume whatever. No dementia. I actually like the idea. So there's a couple ways we could start. One is what Max Time said, which basically you start big, you go small. We could also start small and go big. Basically, we either start with Mario or Samus, is what I'm trying to say. We either start with Samus and the galaxy, or we start with Mario and, like, really small scale, right? I'm actually not sure which of those approaches I like better. We could also, again, because I firmly believe in the reimagining approach here, we could also just kind of rewrite entire elements of the characters and the settings. It's entirely easy to have Mario actually be a member of, for example, the Galactic Federation. Like, that's not a hard thing to do. Just, there we go. Mario and Luigi both are actually citizens of the Galactic Federation, right? Who, Nicholas? Yoshi is the bridge between Samus and Mario. You're gonna have to explain that one. I'm not on it. Oh, Gygus. Right. Ooh. I mean, yeah, Gygus is basically an eldritch abomination. So, Hazel Oak. Yeah, he functionally serves as a Dormammu kind of a thing. Right. So, the tier of the universe, reasonably high tier. I think I'd limit it to sector space, because I think too many things go the galactic or universe route. But I would probably go ahead and limit things to within the range of one sector, which is funny because I said the same thing about the NCU, but I stand by my statement. But space travel would be a thing, a normal thing. FTL drives, that's all a thing. You know, that's all normal. Plenty of sci-fi elements. I would basically go full tilt with sci-fi here. In fact, I would probably try to de-emphasize any magic elements. I would probably make magic existent, but rare and powerful. This is also one of the reasons why Link, a guy who wields a sword, would be relevant in a setting that has space guns and space ships. Because he has magic. You follow me? And thus, any mage is a big deal in this setup. Yeah, Ganondorf would be a similar thing. Ganondorf, despite being just a guy who occasionally wields a trident, would be a big deal. Mario's just bored. Why is boredom always an element of your stories, Eric? Don't answer that. I like the idea of Kirby being basically a non-character, but he's kind of the Hulk. What I mean by that is, he's the emergency backup weapon. I just picture this back and forth. I have an army. We have a Kirby. Now that of course is being played for laughs, but think about that for a second. That's how I would slot Kirby into this. He would be the Hulk. He would be the guy they can't quite control, but no, he's the wrecker. He's the heavy. That's funny. I'm surprised it's that low, comma. I guess not that surprised, period. And yeah, I'm thinking about getting some Mexican myself today, comma. I'm sorry you don't get any, though, period. Lore Mom, lamenting the lack of taquitos. No, he's Captain Marvel. Honestly, in this, I'm not sure who a Captain Marvel would be. Other than Captain Falcon, of course. So, actually, funnily enough, I like the idea of Mario being Captain America and Luigi being Iron Man. Because Mario is the Mario. I mean, there's a reason there's that archetype. But then Luigi's, as much as Mario technically is the same thing, most of Luigi's characterization is usually leaning more towards a tool user. The guy who works around and thinks his way through a situation. He's also a lot less strong and a lot more weak overall, at least in terms of personal power, than Mario. So it kind of fits. It kind of fits. I'm kind of with it. Yeah, Haunted Mansion's a great example of that. Luigi is also more agile. That's true. So I think, yeah, having Mario be the Cap and Luigi being the Tony kind of slides in neatly. Kirby is I like Kirby as the Hulk. I just like that too much. I'm trying to think. So Samus, see, the problem is Samus is kind of a death machine. If anything, she would probably be the closest thing to Captain Marvel, even though she's actually the exact opposite of Captain Marvel. Because Samus is not that personally powerful. She's just that good and has that much backing her, that much technology, that much knowledge, that much skill, that much tech. Yeah, I think Samus would be closer fit to Thor. I kind of agree with that. Because she's clearly going to be basically the heavy here, who isn't Kirby. She is just Samus, destroyer of worlds. Am I right? I also kind of like that because the idea, at least as it was originally intended, was that Thor was the one dealing with the more high tier stuff, while Cap and Iron Man were dealing with the Earthbound stuff. And that kind of fits, right? Samus dealing with her own large-scale problems, while Mario and Luigi are down here dealing with the more small-scale problems, right? Now, we haven't brought up Star Fox yet, but yeah, Star Fox slots in so neatly as the Guardians. I don't really feel I have anything else to add to that. Star Fox are the Guardians. There you go. Bam. They even have Slippy. Come on. They even have a ship and their own ships on top of that, and they are regular galactic travelers. Yeah, no, there you go. Bam, done. But we haven't really decided who Link is. Now, I stand by my earlier statement. I like the idea of magic being rare and powerful. I really like that idea. So I like the idea of Link being someone who is functionally a lot more capable of, being a bit of a game changer than others are. And you guys have already said that. The idea of Link basically being Doctor Strange kind of slides in neatly there. However, Link could also be Hawkeye. Remember, a lot of Nintendo characters are tool users. And that's kind of an issue because the only real MCU characters who are tool users are, Tony and Hawkeye and Thanos. That's basically it. I mean, we could argue that because there's also, I can't even think of his name. Star-Lord. But anyways, no. I like the idea. Yeah, kind of Spider-Man. I like the idea of... Well, we don't need... You know what? Let's rewind a second. We don't need to do one-to-one connections. We don't need to make this the MCU. We're making too many comparisons here. So let's actually kind of wipe that board a little bit down. So let's just bring it back. So we've got Mario and Luigi. Mario and Luigi, who are, people who live in this area. And I like the idea that Link is basically just blinking around. Not actually someone who is static in a specific spot. Eric's idea of time travel, ultimately, as much as that amuses me, I would probably nix that. Because anytime you add time travel to fiction, there's issues. So I just, no. But I like the idea that he is basically using portal magic to hop around to multiple places, because again, mage. Now, that being said, the more I think about this, the more I like the idea that Link isn't actually a mage, he's a mage knight, and Zelda is the full mage. That the two of them form a direct team, that he is the melee and the tank who is being buffed, and that she is the caster who is buffing, debuffing, healing, and damaging, right? And thus, we have a really nice team going between the two of them. So, I would have Zelda and Link be the ones who basically are doing their own thing, probably actually kind of pseudo-vigilanteing as they make their way from world to world trying to deal with problems. We kind of have already talked about something very similar to this, Lycon. Yes, this is a very similar question. See, no time travel next time. I'm sorry, no time travel. Let's just nix it. Let's just nix it. So that's what Mario and Luigi are doing. They're kind of dealing with their own small-scale problems. Link and Zelda are going off doing their own thing. And yeah, we could also have her turn into Sheik and be the ninja from time to time. Samus, obvious, she's dealing with the large-scale, multi-area threats. Kirby is, he's the wrecking ball. Star Fox, they're also... I like the idea of Star Fox retaining their status as mercenaries, rather than actually being heroes. I like the idea of them basically just being mercs who lean towards good, Just that kind of approach to them. Maybe chaotic good at best, something like that. True enough, Dakota. True enough. And yeah, admittedly, even though I am trying to avoid MCU comparisons, Star Fox is a lot like the Guardians of the Galaxy, so whatever. So I haven't addressed Pokemon yet. In an MCU, remember, this is supposed to be a series of movies that we're producing. I don't think I'd include the Pokemon. I don't think that would fit well into a movie format for the presentation that we're going with. So I think I would probably just completely eject Pokemon from the cinematic universe of the Nintendo. I just nix it entirely. At best, I would have them maybe be mentioned in the background, or maybe make Pokemon be a game, like a literal game that people play. You know what I mean? Like it, as in basically just saying that the Pokemon games exist within this cinematic, within these movies that they, and kid playing in the background, there you go, bam. Now, one thing that was part of the question that we haven't addressed is, why did the heroes get together the first time, and who are they facing? The equivalent of the Avengers and Loki, respectively. Now, there's actually a lot of options there. We have so many villains from across the Nintendoverse to pull from. There's just so much you can pull from. I'm actually torn because I have too much choice. Now, I'm already seeing some options here. I kind of like the idea of it being relatively low tier. Avengers had the unique advantage of choosing someone who was functionally low tier, but a very interesting character. They took someone who was brilliantly acted and was very well characterized throughout his film, and basically turned him into a character who continued to be characterized. There's a reason Loki is considered one of the most beloved MCU villains, right? So I kind of like the idea of focusing on someone a little more small scale than any of the big boys, right? No Ridley, no Bowser, no Ganondorf. Try to pull it down a little bit more and have it be someone we can really flesh out a bit more. I like that approach. And yeah, Loki's actually getting his own TV series. That's also true. So, Zero from Kirby is an option. Wart from Mario is an option. We've certainly seen hardly anything about Wart. Gygus is way too high tier, I think. Gygus is literally a galaxy-ending threat. The Master Hand? I could see that. I'm hesitant to bring anything from Smash into this, if I'm completely honest. Because remember, this is a film with live action. So I want you to picture a giant hand, CGI in the background, I would agree with that, Blue Wolf. Vati? I kind of like the Vati idea. Because Vati is just a guy who has a slightly different skin. But otherwise, he's a person. You can have a person acting as Vati, so that's relatively easy to pull across. And he's a mage. And you remember what I mentioned earlier about magic being, rare but powerful? So I kind of like the idea of Vati being someone who could be characterized more, could still be a threat, and significant enough to require the group of them to unite against him, and be easy to pull off in a live-action format for a movie. Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong is always the villain. They're like, okay, we'll stop him now. But he's throwing more barrels than we can jump over, and now there's flames. Oh, God, what do we do? It's okay. We're going to jump over him once we get up top there. No, Donkey Kong. No. Oh, I like this idea. So Zant could be Vadi's second in command, but Zant is the connection to Ganondorf. In other words, I would have Zant survive the first, Nintendo team-up movie. And basically, at the end of the movie, Zant goes and reports to Ganondorf. I kind of like that idea. It's borrowing a little bit too much from the Avengers, but I don't care because it's an idea I'm with. Because that way we can kind of help start to establish Ganondorf's modus operandi. Make him someone who actually reaches out and interferes less directly. Manipulates the situations via minions and whatnot. Would Vati survive? That's a good question. I'm not sure. The way this would... I really don't want to borrow the MCU too much, but I like the idea of Vati being introduced in the first Link film, and then Vati being the villain of the first film, But the catch is that's basically exactly what they did with Loki, and I really am trying to avoid direct comparisons there. That would be Fawful to Ixar. Several people have suggested Fawful as well. No, what he would say, Overlord Mick, is, yeah! Yeah! Still, I do like the idea of Vadi at least being established in the Link film, and then being the main villain of the thing. Maybe one of the things we could theoretically do is make it so that Vadi is trying to learn magic in the Link film. Maybe not make him the main antagonist. Probably not make him the main antagonist. Probably not even make him a main part of the Link film, but make him a background character who is basically someone who is trying to learn magic and failing at it. Then we stitch forward. We get to the team-up film, and in the team-up film, Zant, via Ganondorf, has basically gifted him an artificial chunk of his own power, thus turning Vadi into a mage. Now Vadi is a mage, now he's the threat, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. And then Vadi then becomes a threat as a consequence of being a puppet. He's a Ducat, in other words. Oh my god, Bragwin. No, you know what I would do in these films, and I'm dead serious. How many of you guys have watched Pixar films? At the end of several Pixar films, they have this outrow, basically, fake behind-the-scenes stuff. At the end, Inside and Out did this, Cars did this, etc. Bugs Life did this. You get the idea. Toy Story 2 did this. I would have something like that, and all of the random jokes that we could think of that we don't actually want to put in the film, I would have be in those little outros. And one of the ones at the end of the Link film would be Link just going, hat, and just rolling about the countryside. And as the camera's watching him roll away, and it kind of pulls back a little bit, and then, Zelda's standing there, and she's just got this expression on her face like, something like that. Anyways. Speed running. What are you doing? Speed running! That is true, Nicolas, but I don't want him to do a bomb slide, which is also faster, depending on the length. I'm looking at the things here. I think we've actually... There's one thing we haven't answered. There's actually two things we haven't answered. So we've kind of come up with stuff for Link, Samus, Star Fox, Vati, Ganondorf tie-in, Zant tie-in. What the hell do we do with Mario and Luigi for films? Because hypothetically, Mario and Luigi, and I kind of like this idea, would be separate films leading up in this MCU. Or this NCU, excuse me. So what the hell do you do with Mario? I was actually thinking King Boo as a villain for Luigi. I actually kind of like that idea, Overlord Mark. Because I like the idea of them being separate, Disco. But I have to think about this. Donkey Kong is a rival for Mario. Because I'm incredibly evil, Disco Inferno. Apparently. That's what I keep being told. You guys keep telling me that. No, I don't want to bring the Shadow Queen in early. She's terrifying. She's almost as bad as Dementia, or worse than Dementia. Donkey Kong would be pretty low tier. I do like that, Norgafell. Mario is off go-karting. You have no idea, Micromano. Because I keep being a nice person and people are like, ha ha ha, you're evil. Just because I have an evil laugh. Admittedly, Mario is the one I have the hardest time really deciding something. I do like the idea of Luigi basically dealing with some very low-tier supernatural stuff, like Detective Rarity said there. Luigi, again, being the tool user, working with Dr. I can't think of his name. The doctor guy. He's actually in several Mario games. He's the guy who invented the vacuum. He's the guy who came up with Flood for Sunshine. Egad, that's him. Have Luigi working with Egad and dealing with ghosts, the boos, trying to keep them in line. I also like the idea of him going after maybe we shouldn't do that yet. Something like that. Mario I have a much harder time with. Because the harsh reality is Mario doesn't have much of a character. So we would basically have to invent a character for Mario. Now, I already have a template for that, and this ties into what Eric said. So Eric said, have Mario already won. Mario is basically a retired hero, right? So the template in question I have in mind here is James Raynor from over in StarCraft. Specifically StarCraft 2. The more broken down, old, I'm too old for this crap kind of Mario, right? If you're paying attention, that's the second time I've called Mario that kind of characterization today. But I like the idea that Mario used to be basically what Samus is. That he used to be someone who used to have a suit, who used to run around the galaxy in a ship, saving the galaxy from whatever big threat it was, or space pirates or whatever. And that was in his glory days, which he is now past. He doesn't really have the suit anymore. He doesn't really have anything other than what he is left with. Yeah, Old Man Mario, exactly. Kind of a Logan sort of a thing. Tubes. I mean, I kind of like the idea of using tubes somehow into the mythology of the setting. But yeah, I like the idea of Mario basically being a retired adventurer who isn't really happy with it. He is not happily retired. He is just... And I would have Bowser... I like the idea of doing more with Bowser, because the Bowser I've always liked is the Bowser from the RPG series. And he's not a villain in the RPG series. Not at all. He is actually, in many ways, a heroic character. He just has ego problems and a few issues with self-confidence. So I really like the idea of Bowser actually having more of a presence as either a rival or actually an ally within regards to the cinematic universe. Just my opinion on that. Not a villain, but still a jerk. Yeah, pretty much. A heroic jerk, in my opinion, describes Bowser in the RPGs quite well. In fact, several times Bowser's like, wait a minute. You want to destroy the world? Why would you do that? That's where all my favorite stuff is. It's just... That actually happened. Anyways. So, the question is, we still haven't actually come back to what we actually do with the first Mario film. Like, where we go with that. We've kind of got a starting point, but what do we have be the overall plot of the first film? Now, Overlord Mick mentioned the idea of him basically getting back into the swing of things. And I think Takoida mentioned the Kirby idea. I kind of like combining those two ideas there. I like the idea of the tubes thing. We'd have to decide exactly how they work, but I like the idea of the tubes thing becoming a part of the setting, and Mario basically being one of the only people who knows how to use tubes as teleporters, effectively, as portals. And him being interacting with Kirby as a way to kind of help teach him that, or maybe Meta Knight. I don't know, one of the two. And I also like the idea of him basically realizing that he can still be a hero and still do good, but rather than going the direction of what he did in the past, which was all tech, it was just a suit he was wearing, right? Just like Samus does. Instead, he ends up going in more the direction of pseudo-magic. which would make him, if you're paying attention, one of only 3 characters so far, one of only 3 heroes, I should say, so far, that has anything to do with magic. You mentioned the mushroom thing, Overlord Mick. One of the things I've always liked the idea of is that the power-ups in Mario are basically a form of shamanistic magic. Buffs, to put them in the simplest terms. And I kind of like the idea that Mario realizes that he can still do something, even in the absence of money and backing and, being hired by the Federation, with access to this small scale, but still relevant aspect of magic. Now, the question is, how does he get introduced to this magic? Now, my immediate answer is Zelda. I really like the idea that Link and Zelda cross paths with him, like in his movie, in Mario's movie. And I really like the idea that they're fans, right? Like Link could... I actually love the idea of Link saying, you inspired me to do what I do. You helped us to realize that there is a lot of bad out there that we need to try and help save and stop. And that's one of the reasons why Link and Zelda do the whole teleporting around trying to help people thing, is because they were actually inspired by Mario's old adventures, right? So, now that could... How does he say that without talking? Very carefully. Actually, I guarantee you I could get that across without a single line of dialogue. Because all you'd have to do is have Zelda saying most of the Outworld exposition of, I used to see your stories about, and have Link in the background geeking out. Just absolutely fangasming. Like, and there's this, just picture this scene where the camera's here on Mario, right? And so the camera's facing Mario, and he's talking with Zelda, and you just sort of see Link coming up behind, and he's just like, oh my god, it's actually his hat. And he's just like running a finger like, oh my god. When Mario turns around, what are you doing? And it's easier than you'd think to characterize without dialogue. You just have to put effort into it. And plenty of things have shown this over the years. I don't even need to make that point. However, so Zalok mentioned Rosalina instead of Zelda. If I was going to include Rosalina, I would probably have Rosalina be more of a background element. Maybe Rosalina is the one who taught Zelda magic, and therefore is sort of inadvertently the one who pushes the buffs, the power-ups, onto Mario. But yeah, the problem is Rosalina's pretty high tier, functionally speaking. She's the kind of person who shouldn't even show up until later on. She's kind of like the Ancient One, which Overlord Mick just said. So I don't think I'd have her like directly connected to Mario getting the buffs. Just indirectly connected to it. Like maybe the actual power-ups, the actual consumables that Mario uses to use his temporary, almost alchemical magic, are produced from her. And he's probably not even aware of that at first. Make her Matoya. Ah, dang it, yo. So, would the Shroobs attack? You actually asked that before, Baron. I like the idea of the Shroobs being in there because they're a kind of horrifying and relatively mid-tier threat. But the catch is, that wouldn't be in the first film. That would probably be after the first meetup, the phase 2 of the films, so to speak. Vivian or Goombario? Oh, jeez. I would be very hesitant to directly convert anything like Vivian or Goombario into a live-action film. Oh yeah, Mario would be full monk. Absolutely. That would be all of his fighting style would be full on, a monk, Matrix style almost. I actually love that idea, especially since that's kind of how he fights anyways if you ever, watch Smash Brothers or play Smash Brothers. All right, what's the idea, Detective Rarity? He's good at jumping. So the idea here, Disco, is it's live action, it's movies, And we're just reimagining. We're completely rewriting the rules of everything. He's a Sun Soul Monk. Yeah, I can see that. Hey, Stormwolf. Welcome to yet another of the extremely geeky discussions we've had today. Not that I mind. I love talking about this kind of stuff. Like I said, creative juices. It's great to talk this stuff out. I wish I could actually have more time to write stuff like this. But anyways. I see the fireballs thing, I would have that be a byproduct of the buffs. That he can't do that innately. Probably the same with his overall, like, the jump height, the way he could, like, you know. That would actually be something that would only be capable with the buffs. He would probably still be a reasonably good martial artist without the buffs. But like Captain America, he would be extremely low tier without the buffs. I do like the idea of his retirement. He settled in with Peach, of course. She's not a princess or a queen, she's just Peach. But I also like I've said it before and I've said it again, I like the idea of Peach actually being a doer, someone who's actually takes action, you know. The catch is I have no idea how to write that in the specific setup, other than the obvious thing of give her a suit or whatever. I do like what they did with Carter over in the MCU, to use a parallel. You know, someone who was a very no-nonsense, very good spy master. But I don't know how we would go with Peach in this particular setting. Ow. Actually, I was going to go with something much simpler and stupider to Koida. I like the idea that the only one who calls her princess is Mario. You know, his pet name for her kind of a thing, as a term of affection. If I was going to give really, really low tier magic to Peach, I know this is going to sound stupid, but I like the idea of her being a baker. I know that there's the whole cake thing, but I mean like more than just cakes. Like she actually has a bakery. That's what she does in her retirement with him. And when I'm talking low tier magic, I mean basically her baked goods taste really good. And that's basically it. That's the magic. She cooks, she bakes, and then she just puts a tiny little bit of magic into each thing, and they're excellent as a consequence, you know. Like I said, pretty small tier stuff on that scale. I'm not going to talk about Majora because we have a whole question about Majora after this. Yeah, magic seasoning. Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Now, I mean, we could do a full Mario flashback film. Pretty much the glory days. You could literally make Bowser one of the old space pirates that Mario fought back in the day with the suit. That wouldn't be hard to make Bowser a giant lizard T-Rex death thing, would it? I don't like doing that, though. I'd probably make it something else, but you could do that. You mean kid, Detective Rarity? I'm sorry, I'm upset about that too. We'll come up with suggestions, Disco. I mean, granted, you jumped in the middle of the conversation. That's part of the problem. I mean, just because we disagree doesn't mean we can't both share our ideas. I know, weird. The flood suit. DDD? I gotta be honest, I don't think I would include anything from Kirby lore at all in the films. Kirby himself would basically be an exception, an outlier, right? He would be an anomaly. Like I said, it'd basically make him the Hulk. Like, he is the no really atomic solution to problems that they just don't like to call on unless they really have to. So I wouldn't have Meta Knight, I wouldn't have DDD, I wouldn't have Zero, I wouldn't have Zero 2, I wouldn't have Nightmare. I could keep going. I would have there be Kirby, and that's it. Remember, again, live action. The less we have to do with this kind of thing, the better. I kind of like that idea, Takoida. Like Kirby kind of... Like, we already had the idea of Kirby basically pushing Mario to learning how the pipes work. Or Kirby maybe bringing to Link's attention some stuff that's going on, right? Some kind of get him kickstarted on his adventure. And then, I don't know, basically we could have a way to kind of tie in Kirby to each of the films before the team-up film. No Fire Emblem. I don't think Fire Emblem... I mean, actually, Fire Emblem would work really well as a live-action film, but the tone and approach to Fire Emblem is so different that I would just put it over there and not even try. Maybe as like a guidance story, you know? Like a TV series kind of a thing. And yeah, way too much magic, so that would have to be almost either completely rewritten or redesigned or something. Would there be a Fury-like character? See, I've been debating that, because I could see several instances of that working. Remember, Zelda and Link, as we've designed them, can literally teleport around, and Mario can literally tube around, right? And Samus has a ship, and the Star Fox has a ship. So, and of course, Kirby can warp around with the Warp Star. So we have multiple characters who could function as the ones who get everyone together. I'm not sure who I like best as the one who tries to recruit them into a team, because I like that idea. For the same reason I liked it when Nick Fury did it back in Avengers. My knee-jerk thought is Kirby, as I've already kind of mentioned. But I have to admit, I really like the idea of Luigi doing that. Or, oh, that's an interesting idea, Geludo. Well, how do they cross over then, Disco? Because again, live action. Those are movies, and they're live action. Those are two of the only real limitations we have here. I kind of like Peach being the Fury character. Now I'm torn. See, the problem is there's a lot of characters that could serve for this. What do you guys think? You know what? It doesn't have to be one person. It just occurred to me. Hear me out. Well, then you're screwed, Disco, because that's the question. You have to do live action. That's the problem. That's the creative challenge. Hear me out. I like the idea that Peach and someone else basically get together and kind of argue. They don't argue, but they both realize that the people they're connected to, Mario in Peach's case and whoever in the other person's case, are heroes, basically. You know, the very concept of heroes, and they're people that could do a lot of good if something really bad happened. And you could just kind of have this in the background, kind of like they did in Iron Man 2. You know, just have the shield thing kind of be as a background element of the story, and not really the function of the main plot, until something big happens, which in our case would be Vati. And so then they just kind of like, you know, I could just see at the beginning of the team-up film, Peach basically calling whoever the other person is and being like, hey, we've got some issues here. We've got a heavy. We've got something big. Okay. And, you know, that kind of starts the ball rolling of the team actually getting together. Who would be the other one, though? My first thought was Zelda for that. I don't think I'd have Impa do it. Impa's an interesting character, and we could do some stuff with her, but she doesn't strike me as this kind of character. I think her archetype should be more over here with the... basically, I think she should be more a focus of a Link Zelda film rather than the team-up film. actually kind of like Happy in the Iron Man series, as much as that's a weird comparison. Now, it's funny you say that, Disco Inferno. I was actually thinking that instead of Kirby being a small pink blob, we could literally have Kirby be just a cute, fluffy animal. Right? Like, there are plenty of real-life, fluffy, cute animals that we can bring on set, and that's Kirby. And then he's Kirby, and he's terrifying. And you know, there's plenty of ways that could go, you know. See the Captain Marvel movie if you don't know what I'm talking about. I like it being Zelda. I do like it being... Ooh, I like that, Dakota. Anyone who sees Kirby sees a different animal. I like that idea. So, Zelda and Peach becoming the Fury. The two of them... Because I love the idea that Zelda and Peach just kind of are friends, right? And they've been friends for a long time. One of my favorite... No, my favorite scene in all of the Smash Brothers Subspace Emissary is when... Peach is just standing there on the bridge of the ship, la 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 la, and then some shots come in from Fox's R-Wing, and so Sheik, Zelda, rushes up, knocks out the thing, so Fox has to come out, and so Fox and Sheik just start fighting, and Peach is like, "Excuse me," and Fox is like, "What?" And Peach is offering him tea, and he's like, "Huh?" And then he looks over, and Sheik is already drinking tea, like, "Huh?" I love that scene. But it also was interesting characterization in its own brief way. Because, again, I love the idea that the two of them are friends and have been friends for a really long time. And so they just get together and have tea and cake every now and again. And just chat about stuff. And since Zelda can teleport in the way we've designed this, it wouldn't be hard for Zelda to visit Peach periodically to do that. Well, no, that would probably be Star Fox, Aleph. It's just too easy to slot in the Star Fox into that. Although, Earthbound... If I'm being honest, I would probably save Earthbound. Basically, I would save most of the more side Nintendo things for like later stuff. You know, like they did with Ant-Man and Black Panther, for example. So, Earthbound would be later. You know, Fire Emblem, if we did it, would be later, and so forth and so on. Anyways, I think we've talked this up enough, and we still have one more question. Oh my god. This is the Lore Week that never ends. This is the Geek Week. I'm going to rename this Lore Geek Week. I don't understand that question, Disco. What do you mean, how? They're both people. Zelda's a person. Samus is a person. Bam! Done. Okay. So, last question. I've only been talking for 3 hours and 10 minutes. So, the first part of this question... Oh no, there's no Hyrule, Disco. There's... Link and Zelda are people who are portal travelers. They hop from place to place dealing with issues. They're some of the rare magic users, because we're keeping magic super rare in this. Anyways, so Majora. So, the first question, would you say Majora is like the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, except the mask is its own master? That's a simple question. Yes. Okay, here's the real question. If you were given the reins to use Majora again in a story, how do you do that? Now, for this question, I'm assuming the confines are we are sticking ourselves down into the Legend of Zelda continuity, such as it is, and actually sticking with canon. So, within Zelda, how do you reuse Majora? And yes, Aleph, we will be playing Pathfinder after this. I'm actually going to break for lunch and do my usual 1 hour thing, and then we will get back to Pathfinder for the latter half of the day. Now, I'm staying quiet because I usually like to let you guys get some ideas out before I say anything. Which means you need to give me ideas. Guys, help! Nobody? Nobody has an idea for Majora? Well, I should be getting lunch ready, speaking of which. I guess I do have lunch ready. Do I want to do that? The creation of the mask. So we could do a prequel story talking about the creation of Majora. We could do see, okay, let's actually establish that. Is this a prequel or a sequel? Because I think we should stick with one or the other for this. And I'm actually kind of torn on that. If it's a sequel, we have to explain why Majora is still around. If it's a prequel, then we have all the other problems that are associated with making a prequel. And no alternate dimensional other things, whatever. Let's just skip all that. Let's not do that. Is that it? No, that's not it. Sorry, I'm looking for something specific here. I think it would be a little better sorted. You'd be wrong. There we go. That's an interesting idea, Disco. We could kind of combine Majora with the Twilight, kind of make it so that the essence of Majora was something that kind of helped to end up banishing them in the end, even though that wasn't the original intent. One of the ideas I always liked for Majora, because there's no real continuity canon answer for what Majora is, oh, and I checked, by the way, is that Majora is just a thing they put a bunch of curses into, and so much evil magic and so many curses just kind of became Majora's Mask. Basically turning it into a low-tier version of X-Death. Now, that kind of works, but I prefer the idea that it's something a little bit more deliberate. See, I'm bouncing around a few ideas in my head here. I like the idea that Majora started off as a person. A decent person. And that Majora is basically one of the champions or heroes or whatever of the Shadow Tribe, what would eventually become the Twilight People. And he or she, doesn't matter, gender doesn't matter here, they are... basically, the whole of their story is focused around them trying to run around and remove all of these nexus points of evil magic throughout the world, which are causing the world to slowly fall into the Twilight Realm, right? Now, this would then, of course, make this a double tragedy, because obviously, even the moment you start the game, you know where this is going to go. He's going to fail at preventing the realm from falling into the Twilight Realm, and he's going to become Majora's Mask and become this horrible, terrible thing. I do like the idea, because I don't like everything being completely depressing, of this being like a... basically, he succeeds while he fails. You know, maybe the only reason Hyrule manages to endure at all is because of the efforts of Majora. That Majora was actually able to save part of the world, just not his own home. And Termina, there you go. Majora was actually able to save Termina, or whatever, you know, as a consequence of his actions. And I also like the idea that as part of his actions, the people, the Shadow Tribe who are converted in the Twilight Realm I'm saying this wrong, who are shoved into the Twilight Realm are converted as they go so they can survive there, so that they actually can endure and live within the Twilight Realm, rather than what would have happened, which is them slowly dying out of horrible death, right? I mean, you take a human being away from the sun, it's going to be a bad situation. So, in short, Majora actually succeeds, just not in the way that they wanted to. Of course, again, the only problem here is that, and this is the problem with most prequels, you already know where this is going. Like, you know how this is going to end up, even at the beginning of the film, or game, excuse me. Now, I would want to bring in the fierce deity thing, absolutely. I just have no idea how. The fierce deity has always been something that's bothered me about Majora's Mask, because it's one of the weirdest, most off-the-wall, non-explained things in the entire game. It's one of the biggest holes in the lore of Majora's Mask. It's just, there's the fierce deity, it's the bad guy, it's super powerful, it's the adult. That's it! That's all we know. It's such an absolute blank slate that I never know what the heck to do with it. What the heck do we do with that? So what the heck do we do with that? Gosh darn it, really? Okay. Yeah, I don't like the Zelda manga at all, personally. No offense to anybody who likes the Zelda manga. Where in the world? So, I mean, I suppose the easy answer would be just make the fierce deity the final boss of the Majora game. Like, make that be the thing that you were fighting against, right? I knew it, Overlord Mick! I could just do that. That's not a bad idea. Let's do that. Sorry, thinking out loud. We could take the story arc in a direction where, like, the first blah we go after, let's call them anchors. The first anchor you go after is this horribly evil entity, right? And you kill them and absorb them into yourself, and that's what you do. And then you go to the next one, and it's slightly less evil. And you already get where this is going. It gets to the point where Majora becomes so focused on trying to absorb the energy and power of all of these anchors, either because Majora is so stuck in his way, or because Majora is becoming power hungry, or even both, that it gets to the point where eventually Majora ends up going after the fierce deity. Now, the fierce deity is probably... I wouldn't make the fierce deity a good guy. Quite the contrary. I'd make the fierce deity basically your typical Greek god. An asshole, in other words. And I would make the fierce deity someone who is substantially stronger than Majora. And thus, you know, bam, 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 bam. Oh, God. And, you know, you end up getting wrecked by him. And that's basically the midway point of the game. The latter half of the game then becomes about trying to eventually rise up to the point where you can stand up against the fierce deity and defeat him, and then go and fulfill your purpose of, as I mentioned earlier, with regards to the Twilight and the Twilight film, and blah, 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 blah. I think that's the general direction I'd go with that. I don't have many ideas here, if I'm being completely honest. This part I wanted to bring this on the stream. Yeah. You address omnipotence. And yeah, Endgame is continuing to smash records, like you do. I think we're going to go ahead and chop off there. So, there we go. So for those of you watching on YouTube for this extremely long video,